And a very good afternoon, a very good morning to you. Today is Wednesday. That was the last thing Johnny Ward said before the mics went live, because we'd lost today there.
It's hard to keep up though at times, isn't it?
How are you, Johnny?
Not too bad, not too bad. Fairly wet weather has returned to Dublin.
And for the whole week, apparently.
Yeah.
Just in time for the bank holiday weekend.
Yeah, I've been saying for about, I think for 8 to 10 months, Dublin has become a bit of a Mediterranean climate. Very little rain, really, but things have turned. And from a racing perspective, it's actually quite necessary. That, like, Ballinrobe, they were racing last night, and you could hear them like on the ground in Ballinrobe, which is like a place that gets plenty of rain. It's just been a mad year, but the rain is probably welcome from the racing front anyway. We
haven't had you in since the Green Surge at the weekend.
The Green Surge.
The elections.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. I'm going to after time here, but like I definitely expected the Greens to do very well, and I expected Sinn Féin to do poorly, but I don't think anyone could expect how much they swung in those directions. And you know, Green candidates all over the country. You know, the young candidate, I think she's only 28, nearly getting elected in the Northwest, who came from nothing. And there's a lovely story of her, Sarah McHugh, of her kind of badgering Eamon Ryan with suggestions on what they should do, and she goes, well, why don't you just run for us? And nearly got elected actually. But I think it's great. I put it up on Twitter that, you know, I think this is a great swing. Ultimately, I think climate change is the only thing that really matters at the moment for everyone. Like, unless you're in Aleppo or Homes, or obviously we have Brexit to worry about, climate change is pretty much all that really matters. And I think people have finally copped onto that, even in rural areas.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if that persists into a general election, but hopefully it does. And
I think so.
Shakes things up a little bit.
Do you think it's a good thing?
Absolutely, yeah. I do. I think that the last time that they were in a situation to get into power, they mishandled it catastrophically. Mm-hmm. And I would hope that they've learned the lessons, but history teaches you politicians don't learn lessons, that they repeat the same tricks until their career ends in failure, and then the next crowd come along and repeat the tricks and sins of their fathers and mothers. So let's hope. I think
it's a very, very different scenario now for them. I think them holding the balance of power is eminently possible, because there's such a loss of Sinn Féin's vote, and obviously the Greens taking so much of just general voters are worried about the climate. I think when they were in power with Fianna Fáil, it was probably a no-win situation. It didn't work out for them at all. But I looked at their last manifesto for the last elections, and I pretty much agreed with everything they said. I mean, I think Sinn Féin as well, I think they really fell down on their opposition to the carbon tax, which they probably thought is something that was like very much looking after the poor people who are going to be hit with carbon tax. But people clearly didn't vote for Sinn Féin because they weren't happy with them in terms of their climate response, and some of the left-wing parties as well, I feel anyway.
It's going to be interesting to see what happens to that, because I think there was a low turnout and I think that that has had the biggest knock-on impact on Sinn Féin's vote. So
that a lot of working class people didn't vote compared to other elections.
The turnout was very low, so it will be interesting to see if that is actually just them not getting their vote out for a change, which obviously would be unusual enough for them.
We've mentioned, like me, when I was talking remember when I used to go up to Glentoran games, and we've talked about that in the show. I spoke to a Glentoran fan this morning just about the Alliance Party, and one of the biggest stories which has been ignored, I think, is that the swing of SDLP transfers to the Alliance rather than Sinn Féin. I thought that was very, very interesting. Sinn Féin bombed in the north, really, in many ways, despite Martine Anderson. I don't know if she first elected, but very, very interesting times. Like this was a huge swing in the north when Alliance basically got almost a third. They got a third of the seats, obviously, but they got huge transfers, and a lot of people are clearly pissed off with. Imagine if your two options were Sinn Féin or the DUP. I mean, would that not piss anyone off? And you've you look at what's happening in Casement Park and all that, and the lack of a government is really, people are really suffering, and people are pissed off about that, and they want people who are elected to be politicians to actually be in power and to have a government up there.
And to make some hard decisions. Here's what's coming up on the show today. We've got Tommy Walsh coming your way in about 15 minutes' time. I'm going to talk to him before 8 o'clock this morning. We'll preview the weekend's hurling action, look back at last weekend's action, and might also talk to him about a fight on the eve of the Europa League Final. After that, we're going to talk with Gary Breen about the Europa League Final, get his thoughts on that, and also look forward to Champions League Final this weekend. We're bringing the sports news, and we've got an update on the George Gibney situation with the journalist Irvin Muchnick, who's been covering this case now for a very long time. He feels like there is a possibility that Gibney might eventually be extradited to face justice for the crimes of which he's been accused. That's coming your way at 8:55 this morning. Let's bring in the newspapers this morning first. I'm going to start with the Times Ireland edition. Klein and Haley part of Japan plans. So Mike Haley, despite the fact that he didn't have a very good end to the season, was fairly heavily criticised for not being able to take the ball in the air in the Saracens game, has made the Ireland World Cup extended squad. Obviously this is a training squad and it'll be cut down to the travelling party in August, but it's a 44-man pre-World Cup training squad, and he's the big surprise, I suppose. It had been widely flagged, certainly on this show anyway, by Alan Quinn, and that John Klein was going to be in it. Klein will become eligible to play for Ireland under the residency rules, having lived here for 3 years in August. The other picture there is Maurizio Sarri throwing his hat at it and storming off. He's pictured with assistant Marco Ianni throwing his cap in frustration during the training session because Gonzalo Higuain and David Luiz had a bit of a scrap.
Yeah, obviously there are different versions of what happened there. I don't think there's, from my understanding, I wouldn't think there's that much to it. He's probably quite a typical Italian character in terms of his histrionics and the way he behaves. He seems to be a proper football coach. I doubt there's too much to it. I think seemingly Higuain went in a little bit late maybe on Luiz, and Luiz reacted, but just on the Times, it's very sad to see that paper is on the way out. It was strange that it's kind of came into the market at a time when papers seem to be in terminal decline, but it's been, I think the stable in general has done excellent work in terms of Irish football, and that paper has a lot of quality, and it's sad to see it go.
Yeah, no, for sure. The sports section has always been really good.
Like the likes of Gary Doyle and Shane Keegan's gone in there doing he's done a weekly piece, obviously run early sports editor. It's sad that these people now have to look to find new jobs, because a lot of really talented work on out there. And I thought when their subscriptions were doing very well post the FAI revelations in the Times Online that things were looking up. So I've obviously done work for the paper myself, but I've had huge time for them. I thought they were great to work for and always very readable in sports. Tommy Conlon as well, people like that, just plenty to read.
Yeah, we wish them all the best. What have you got for us?
Yeah, so Lohan hits out. This is the Irish Daily Mail. Obviously, Brian Lohan, proper Clare legend, he's hit out at Davy Fitzgerald's behaviour at the weekend. And obviously then we have South African Klein, partially into the Ireland squad. Banner legend hammers Fitz over his antics. And the aforementioned Tommy Conlon actually had a piece, and I think in yesterday's Times, I read it online, so I could be wrong, but I think it was yesterday's, about Davy's nonsense on the sideline. I think at this stage it's just becoming a bit tiring.
Ravy Fitz was the headline on
Ravy Fitz, I like that.
It was pretty good, wasn't it? So there's Davy Fitz at the weekend, getting sent to the stands. It looks like he's not going to be banned. Yeah. The referee's report is going to be, actually maybe he was being penalised for being Davy as opposed to for anything he actually did. So for once, there's two sides to this story.
Yeah, but I think that the bottom line is the treatment of officials in Gaelic games has been a massive issue, and they deserve to be defended to the hilt by the authorities, I think. And I remember this from being a kid, underage, like the abuse referees were getting under 14 games,
Yeah.
mainly from parents.
Yeah, or
coaches.
Yeah.
Or both.
Yeah.
And at the time, I used to think it was kind of hilarious, and you'd have the fella on the line trying to keep the coach the other side of the white line when he would encroach like maybe 10 yards over the line, and he could have been roaring at the referee as well. But the more you think about it, who'd be a referee?
Yeah, I mean, it's mad. I can't understand how they get anybody to referee those games.
And it's also it's an extremely difficult game to referee, I think. Both hurling and particularly Gaelic football, like the tackle is obviously very, very on the line.
Yeah.
And I don't believe it pays all that well either, so, but I think they need to. I don't like that nonsense from Davy at all.
It is mad how the referees get paid, isn't it? In the amateur and everything is volunteer, except the referee, because we appreciate the fact this guy needs to get paid, because otherwise no one's going to do it.
Well, of course, nobody gets paid in Gaelic games.
Do the referees not get paid?
Nobody apart from referees.
Yeah.
Nobody else.
Well, okay.
Nobody else.
Okay. Loads of people get paid, obviously. All the full-time officials who work for the organisation, and all the managers who are taking payments under the counter. That
doesn't exist.
Okay, Emery takes club inspiration. Arsenal boss using Liverpool as a template to become a European heavy hitter. So Unai Emery's looking at Liverpool saying, I want a bit of that. O'Brien Cup KO, a massive loss. Jacob Stockdale reckons that not having Sean O'Brien in the World Cup is a massive loss. And some of Davies' antics aren't great. Former Clare star Lohan. So these comments from Brian Lohan are pretty interesting. We put some of them to Tommy in a little while. I don't know if it's genuine passion. We're all passionate about the game, but we show it in different ways. So, he has the way he does things, and people have to kind of fit into that. But I think some of the antics, they're not great.
Yeah, I think with Wexford as well, it's Davy and Mourinho have comparisons. I think in that after maybe 3 years, they probably run out in terms of effect. That I remember speaking to one of the Wexford players this year, and he had a feeling that it was a bit of a now or never year for them in general. And in fairness to them at Pearse Stadium, after Davies' histrionics, things did improve. I don't know if the two were related, but
it's not the first time that's happened.
No, you can see him with the Tip lads a few years ago as well, having a scrap on the pitch. Like I just think it's nonsense, really. But the Star, Sarri kicks off, and they've a photo of the two relevant players actually training, but it doesn't look like there's much going on there. And Klopp's never been better. Jurgen Klopp says he has never had a better chance of winning Champions League, and believes his Liverpool side are the best he has taken to a final. And obviously more Brian Nolan.
Yeah, so the front of the Examiner Sports section this morning is Mad Hatter. Sarri walks off in fury as Chelsea players clash ahead of Arsenal battle, and the picture of John Kiley on the top is can do better. John Kiley says Limerick must improve in every department against Waterford. Do Waterford have a kick at them? Again, we'll ask this of Tommy in a little while. Kieran Shannon's writing about Steph Curry. Steph Curry doesn't have to be a finals MVP to be invaluable, saying that he's currently the best player in basketball. O'Brien and Levy will be sorely missed by Schmidt as World Cup nears. Yeah, I think that losing O'Brien and Levy is actually a fatal blow to Ireland's hopes of getting past a World Cup quarter-final, to be honest. I don't
really?
I think that all of your eggs are in the Josh van der Fleer basket, and actually having somebody to come off the bench for the last 20 minutes who is Dan Levy or Sean O'Brien or Josh van der Fleer is game-changing. And it's just, I don't know.
We're talking very fine lines where nearly everything would need to go right anyway for Ireland.
So like a 19-16 game in our favour now becomes a 16-10 game.
Yeah.
It's like, what can you do?
The Mirror back page is effectively just the stories that we've mentioned anyway. Interesting one here inside though. Kenny rubbishes special treatment claim. Republic of Ireland under-21 manager Stephen Kenny insists Caoimhín Kelleher isn't getting special treatment compared to domestic players, and this is ahead of the Toulon tournament. And there's interesting stuff in the papers about this. I think it's in particular the Sun, which I can actually go to now because the Sun has really good League of Ireland coverage in today. Lots of good stories. Sarri ball at the last. Unai backs checkmate as well. That's ahead of the final, and FIFA won't step in terms of sorting the FAI mess. But the Kenny stuff is interesting in that he was forced to defend bringing League of Ireland players away from their clubs for what is effectively seen as a friendly tournament in Toulon, which starts next week. I'm with Stephen Kenny on this, to be honest. I think what they've done now is that they've changed fixtures and they've scrapped a load of games, and it's not good for the fixture list. I think these League of Ireland players need to be playing in tournaments like this, and as Kenny said not that long ago, there were never any Irish players in the under-21 squad. In this one there were 7 until Neil Ferrugia was ruled out injured yesterday. And I think Stephen Bradley, the Shamrock Rovers manager, he's been a little bit annoyed about it. He would be quite affected by it as well. But I think
so essentially what's happened is Kenny has called up players as his right to play for Ireland at international level in the Toulon tournament, and because so many players are gone, a round of fixtures in the League of Ireland have been postponed.
Yeah, I think it's more than that, because I think Derry are now going to go 6 weeks without a home game when all things are added in, and they've I think it might even be 2 rounds of games.
Okay.
I should get clarity on that, but you know, you have the likes of obviously Ferrugia, Dara Leahy, Danny Mandreo, all these El Bouzetti, all these players who've made some waves in the League of Ireland. And Kenny was probably annoyed about this when he was a coach for Dundalk himself. But I think League of Ireland players, we need to have League of Ireland players in Ireland squads, and I think we need to do our best for them.
And so, is this not a little bit of the league not fully understanding sometimes what's good for it? It just feels a little bit like the league are annoyed that its players are so good that they're playing for Ireland.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. I think Bradley's point is that this is effectively a friendly tournament.
But it's not. It's an international tournament of
no, it's not. And it's
significant prestige.
It is. It's live on. It's live on TV, and they're taking on World Olympic squads as well. A point that Kenny has made many times. You know, you look at the likes of the Liverpool centre back, whose name escapes me now. He's going to be let go from Liverpool. The lad from, I think he's from Lucan Kildare direction. What was that again? No, not him actually. Thanks for that show. The Irish lad. Conor Masterson. So he's coming to a situation where he's coming into this squad and his future is like all over the place. He's a lad who was very close getting into, I think he was in one Champions League squad for Liverpool or two.
He was on the bench.
Was on the bench, and he's coming into this. This is a shop window for him if he's playing. And it's a very important tournament for the League of Ireland players. Like, it gives the League of Ireland a lot of kind of recognition as well, that it's actually a league going places where you see all these players in the squad and you're like, who do they play for? Oh, Shamrock Rovers or UCD or whatever. And I'd be with Kenny on this, to be honest. I think the FAI should be doing what's right for the players and giving them the opportunity.
Yeah, no, 100% right. So there it is, Mircea Sarri kicking his cap, kicking up a fuss in Baku. Sarri storms out of Chelsea training session on eve of final. I did see some Arsenal fans with Mkhitaryan in the back of their shirt being stopped by the police in Baku. It was, not a great look for football. Nothing happened. They weren't detained or anything. So, I don't know. Definitely wasn't a good look, though.
No.
The other story in the front of that is Jeff Bezos' ex-wife has announced she's giving half of her $37 billion to charity. So that must be very annoying for Jeff Bezos.
That's all right. Prendergast optimistic Mad Moon will stay Epsom trip in the Racing Post. Kevin Prendergast at 86 years of age bidding for Derby glory on Saturday with Mad Moon.
William McCreary did a great Kevin Prendergast impression at the roadshow on Friday night. He was talking, he's a great lad. He's awful nosy though.
Yeah.
It was like, who's that lad running? And he obviously did the voice. It was like, I'm not telling you. He just wouldn't tell him. And then Prendergast rang him up half an hour later, said nothing but, I found out, and hung up.
He's an absolute legend. Still likes a few pints, likes to go fishing, and gets up every morning at literally the crack of dawn. If you ever do a stable tour with Kevin Prendergast, you're there very, very early. I'm talking very early.
I'd say there's good crack had on the gallops and the Curragh, where they're all just, there's like a 5-minute period where they all just come and smack talk each other and then go about their own ways.
You could do a beautiful documentary on a summer at the Curragh, even a week at the Curragh, just by following personalities like Frank Oakes. I remember one morning I did a piece in the Curragh, and I remember talking to Frank Oakes, and he'd one horse in training at the time, and he was telling me about how he rides them out and all that. He's 77 now, I think. I remember just all the different characters. You'd Dermot Well coming in with a battalion of horses, and then you'd have the likes of Frank Oakes, and you'd have all the people in between. I remember talking to Martin Brassel. He was telling me how they worked horse in the Curragh that winter at minus 19 degrees, I think.
Wow, yeah.
It was one of the cold winters, and it's a real hub, and the Curragh racecourse itself is in the news at the moment because it's just trying to finally, I suppose, become that modern stadium that it should have been, with teething problems, and we shouldn't lose sight, obviously, from the area of how important the Curragh is in terms of a hub of activity and social life as well.
Yeah, it needs to reconnect with the locality. And
totally.
I think that's the type of thing that happens over a period of time. You can't force people to all of a sudden like something that hasn't been around as well as it should have been for years. That I think that's a slowly over the next couple of years is going to happen.
Yeah, it needs to happen though, Ger. Like you look at Ballinrobe the last couple of nights, and the crowds that are getting there, and the real like feeling it has in the local area where people really embrace Ballinrobe. Going into County Galway, Sligo, Roscommon, they go racing there, but it's a real County Mayo track. If ever you go there, Mayo football will always be talked about. The Curragh should be a place that all the GA clubs in Kildare feel that they should go to at least one day a year and have a day out there and bring people back from the community, and don't be this kind of vaguely aloof place that caters for very rich people.
Here you go, Blue Thunder. Sarri storms out as Chelsea prepare for Big Nine. This isn't not the first time that Maurizio Sarri has stormed out this season, but things worked out okay when he nearly left the last time in the penalty shootout. Europa League Final, Chelsea versus Arsenal, Olympic Stadium, Baku, 8 p.m. We'll talk about that in just a little while with Gary Breen this morning. And sorry, I should have opened this earlier, but it is the Irish Times sports section. There's the front of it there. Road to Recovery starts with doing nothing. That's the 2 weeks holidays. Gordon Darcy's, who's in the swimming pool in that picture? I can't actually see it there. So Connacht players, Dominic Robertson, McCoy, Peter McCabe, Kyle Godwin, Matt Healy and Ní Adilokan enjoying a recovery swim in Cape Town during the squad's visit to South Africa last November. So obviously that's the sports people having a rest, because that's what's happening at the moment. And then the column here from Darragh O'Shea. Donegal and Roscommon improving, but unlike Mayo, not real contenders.
Yeah, I think the Anthony Cunningham going back to Salt Hill narrative is fascinating altogether, and I was away at the weekend. I only got to watch the Sunday game last night, and some of the analysis was like absolute pantomime. I think it's becoming, are we actually analysing here, or are we just becoming? Now I know it's been like this for a long time. I thought Kieran Whelan did some very good stuff on Mayo Roscommon in terms of the kickouts and all that, but this was just like I'm repeating what loads of people have said here. This was classic Mayo, though. I mean, you just look at the absolute mental failure in front of goal, like time and time again. A game that they should have won. Now, being Mayo, they'll probably end up in the Super 8s and end up losing to Dublin by a point or something like that. But Christ almighty, like I thought winning the league final at Croke Park would do something for them. I mean, O'Connor's shot in front of goal, like that's just a mental breakdown. Like you can't just slice a ball that badly wide. The madness of the free kick then at the end, where it's kind of like none of them really wants to take it.
Yeah.
And McLaughlin, who didn't have a particularly good game, then you could almost sense that he was going to miss. But I don't know.
Last one for you now is the Irish News, and this is a big story coming from Derry. Hassan steps down as Derry Treasurer. Derry County Board Treasurer Michael Hassan has resigned amid the county reportedly suffering from financial difficulties. He had stepped in when he was approached after the failure to appoint a treasurer at the 2018 convention. He took the role after the previous role's incumbent, Liam Peoples, declined to run for the position again after 2 years in the job, and the previous incumbent had also cut short his term. You're supposed to do a 5-year stint, but the last 3 guys have only done 2 years apiece, and there's no suggestion of any wrongdoing, reports the Irish News this morning. It's Cara Kane on the part of Hassan, Peoples or Brennan, but all had struggled to arrest the growing spending demands, and several sources have described the role as impossible. So Derry GA not going great off the pitch, even if there are some green shoots of recovery on it. Let's move on, because we want to talk about the weekend's hurling, and I want to say Tommy Walsh is with us this morning. Tommy, good morning to you.
Well, Gerald, Johnny.
How are you, Tommy?
Before we get into the weekend's hurling, there's pictures all over the papers of Maurizio Sarri this morning. He's very annoyed because a fight broke out in the last training session before the cup final between Gonzalo Higuain and David Luiz. And I was wondering, could you identify with this? The last training session before an All-Ireland final? Was there ever lads flaking each other in training?
I presume you're saying that with sarcasm, Ger. I'd say if Brian Cody used to walk out of training session every time there was a fight, I'd say we'd never have a manager at train. But I suppose there's a big difference. I don't know what happened in the Chelsea training ground, but I suppose ours was all honest and kind of, it was in the right spirits. There was never any nasty stuff. There was never any stuff done with bitterness or anything like that, which would be a total different scenario. So all our stuff was healthy. We were all able to go into the dressing room, have the crack, have the laughs afterwards. There was never anything maybe untoward. So there is a difference, I suppose, if there's kind of maybe 2 rivals there in training and they're just kind of having a go at each other, that's probably not good. So it depends on the situation. But the last training session, especially for the big games, they were different, I suppose, in the hurling that you're playing for your position on the field. Because maybe I'd say the team is probably fairly well named in Chelsea there. I'd say it's maybe more a rivalry between 2 guys possibly.
Yeah. Just on Tommy, over the year, did you suffer many injuries in training? Because I personally think that the club situation where they don't play club and during championship and all that, and the club just goes on holiday, I think is a load of nonsense. I love the way Kilkenny used to always hurl club as well, but in training, did you ever sustain injuries considering how reportedly physical and honest it was?
Yeah, well, I think most of the injuries that happen really nowadays are more kind of hamstrings and grinds, and lads are pushing their bodies to the limits now, Johnny, that any little kind of offset at all, you're kind of in trouble. Towards one time you had a bit of leeway that no one was, we'll say, 100% fit. No one was taken to their bodies to the absolute limits. So any kind of a niggle at all, it didn't really matter as much. Towards now, guys are so finely tuned that hamstrings, grinds, cruciates, it's much more easier to happen. Like, say that time when I started, it was around 2002 with Kilkenny. You trained probably 3 times a week. Towards now, you're training 7 times a week. So I think there's a big difference in the demands guys are putting on their bodies now. But as regards hitting each other in training and the physical stuff, there was never really any injuries. Because, like, say if you take soccer or that, you're putting in your ankles, you're putting in your legs for any tackles in training. Towards in hurling, really, it's just the hurling. Hurls are so light nowadays, and that you get a belt of a hurl, it might be sore. You're not really going to come out with too much of an injury. Bar a guy tries to maybe do you really?
And on that,
let's talk a little bit about Davy Fitz the weekend. He's coming from some criticism from Brian Lohan in the papers this morning. Brian Lohan was doing the Legends Tour of Croke Park, and obviously they're former teammates, but there has been a bit of history between them when they were both involved with LIT and UL, and Brian Lohan had previously called for a root and branch examination of Clare hurling after Clare went out of the championship, and Davy apparently thought this was kind of aimed at his dad, who obviously was centrally involved in running Clare GA for a long time. So there's a bit of bad blood between them, and you have to put that in context on it. Is he right though? Are Davy's antics actually a distraction for the players, do you think?
Again, it goes back to really how it's kind of put out to the team. If you go back to that example you gave at the start of the show about Sarri walking away from Chelsea, when a guy does that now, it kind of sends out bad messages that there is bad blood and it is affecting the team. So, say if a manager, say maybe looked at the bigger picture, he might be seething inside, laugh it off, and off you go, say, oh, this is great. We're showing our hunger, we're showing our fighting spirit before the biggest game of our season, the Europa League Final. Well, then that's a kind of a different slant to put on it. But I'd say the same with Davy Fitz. If you start putting the slant on it, that it's not good for Wexford, it's kind of a sideshow, it's taking the I suppose the limelight away from the players, suddenly then that starts creeping into guys' heads. It might creep into maybe the family's head, it might creep into the guys that are in your club, their heads, and suddenly it all starts feeding through to the players. Towards if it's put out there that no, it's brilliant and that it's really they were in trouble at the time that Davy Fitz did that, and you could put the slant on it that he really kind of revitalised the team and he got them fighting again. So Ger, I think it just depends on what slant you put on it. But he was put off the other day, and I think it's more of an issue for the I suppose the wider GA, in that do we send out a message? Now, I'd say not now. It's too late now. You send it out before the next game. So it's all has to happen is John Horn or the president of the GA comes out and says, or the Referees Association comes out all over the media all week and say, listen, anyone now, no matter who you are, whether it's the club or whether it's the county, anyone that goes up to a third official, in any sort of a way, you're gone. And just, it's like the rugby really. I always put it down to the consequences, Ger. If you think there's massive consequences, you won't do it. Davy done that the other day because he knows there was managers and selectors doing it left, right and centre around the country for years, and many of them have got away. So there's a grey area there. Towards if it was put out there straight, there's going to be no negotiations. It doesn't matter whether you're shouting and roaring or whether you just go up to him. You're not allowed to go up to the third official, and that's just end off. And I think the consequences, you get a 4-week ban or whatever. So I think it's the consequences really are the major talking point really.
I think Tommy's spot on there as well, and I think the GA does need to lead on this in the sense of zero tolerance towards this sort of nonsense, and to encourage people to get into refereeing. It's I as far as I know, there was and there has been crises with regard to getting young people to referee in games. It's not attractive, and it's all levels of the game. And what I thought Davy really further let himself down with his comments afterwards, Tommy, where he was like, he wanted to make a name for himself, and in fairness he did. And I was like, well, you made a name for yourself here, and it wasn't a good name.
Yeah, well, I suppose it depends, Johnny, on it's definitely 50-50 on how it's split, the opinion on this. Davy is a guy that inspires so many as well. So you have guys that will jump on Davy's kind of fence, and then you have guys that will jump on, we'll say, Brian Lohan's side of things. So I think really it's a matter of opinion and depends on your own probably personality and that. So I suppose to take the personalities out of it, I suppose they could come up with some sort of a rule.
Let's move on and talk about the games this weekend, because Waterford and Limerick and Clare Tip are the Munster hurling games. There's obviously one game only in Leinster this weekend. That's Carlow against Dublin. Do Waterford have a kick left in them? Are we just writing them off and saying it's automatic now that they're going to lose every game? Because they're not really that bad a team, are they?
No, and the only reason, as you know, I tipped them at the start of the year, so they have to have a big push on Sunday or I'm in trouble. But the way I look at it is, are they losing all their games because they're playing really well and things just aren't working out for them? No. So none of them are in form, Ger. You have to compare them to we'll say Ger Gilroy was speaking about the Galway-Wexford game at the weekend. I was reading him yesterday, and he was just pointing out that you know if it was a good game or a bad game by picking out a man of the match. And it was very difficult to pick out the man of the match in the Galway-Wexford game. Will you go back and compare that to the Waterford team of this year? Could you maybe point out 2 or 3 players that are in the form of their lives? You couldn't really. I was thinking about it last night, and the only guy that I could really, I suppose, name that is standing up to it is the fullback Conor Prunty. And he's one of the youngest players on the team. He's playing really, really well and against top players in the first 2 games against Clare and versus Tipperary. Like he marked Callan the last day, and he marked a few lads versus Clare as well. And he's playing really well. But other than that, you couldn't pick out a lad that's in form. So would I give him a chance? Of course I would, because they just need lads to get in form. I would hope that maybe like in hurling, there's 3 real, well, in any sport, there's three really fundamentals. You have your fitness. I imagine they're all fit at this stage. Then you have the whole spirit and heart. That's another side of things. And then you have tactics, skill, we'll say. Put them into another group. So basically at the moment, if I'm Waterford, I'm forgetting about tactics. I'm forgetting about skill. The only thing they need is heart, spirit. Go back to the Waterford people. They've asked for this home ground for the last 12 months. They've got it. In the first game, there wasn't that much explosion, much fieriness out of them. Let's go back and just show them fieriness. We've seen John Myler picking the Cork team the last day, Ger. He basically said that he wasn't picking his team anymore on skill. He was picking them on work rate. And look at the response that got out of the Cork guys the last day. Like, you couldn't really compare Cork's first performance versus Tipperary versus the first 2 performances for Waterford. And, you'd wonder, Cork after the first day, could they ever come out with another good performance? And suddenly they came out with an absolutely brilliant performance against the All-Ireland champions. So, yeah, give them a great chance. But one thing they have to do is come out with some fireness.
Can I just ask you a little bit about the general standard of the championship so far then? Because it's interesting, the point about the man of the match. And, okay, so there's been great performances from individuals on the Tipperary team, and Tipperary performances, maybe if we put them on a bit of an island. But has the standard generally just not been as good this year? Or was last year, were we all spoiled a little bit? Or what's your take?
Yeah, well, you see, we're not far enough into it, really. Like last year, like there was such great performances from teams and still losing towards this year. The teams that are losing are not playing well, Ger. It's not that 2 guys went at it like 2 fighters in a boxing ring when Rocky Balboa and went pound for pound, These guys, one of them is playing really well on a given day and one of them is playing poorly. There's no one coming out playing one of the greatest matches. Like, you don't hear anyone saying that was an absolute epic. So yeah, we're finding it hard this year so far, but there's still a good few games to go in it. Like, this is only Limerick's 2nd game. For everyone else, it's their 3rd game. But yeah, no, listen, you could definitely make the point that teams aren't in the same form as they were last year.
It is going to take off, though, isn't it? Galway going to Nolan Park. That's going to be an absolutely massive game. Obviously, Limerick on the back of losing to Cork. And I think it was DJ Carey was writing this morning in one of the papers that he's found it very kind of underwhelming. But I think, Tommy, you can feel maybe that, it is early days. It will take off.
Yeah, and I suppose last year was just the creme de la creme.
High standards, yeah.
Yeah, it was, I was watching summer hurling during the Christmas, Johnny, and you could pick out any of the games and they're all absolute epics. Go back straight to the semi-finals. Like we said, the semi-finals last year was the greatest weekend in hurling in the history of the GAA, and it was because we thought the Galway and Clare game, the All-Ireland semi-final, wouldn't be matched, and we even got a better game the following day. So yeah, I think we're probably not seeing as many epics this year.
Tommy, I know that the legend Dick Walsh has passed away in Tullaroan. Can you tell us a bit about him?
Yeah, so Dick of the Church, he was 100 there last year, 101 this year. Just a fantastic character in the parish. I was kind of explaining to the local radio station the other day, when I got to know him, he was in his 70s, which was in the early 90s, and he's still going to as far as today. You'd be talking about heard you speaking about was it the Derry guys and maybe expenses and the amount that is spent on teams. Well, you have physios, you have your masseurs and that. Dick the Church was our masseur back in the 90s. Just a local guy, 70 years of age. He had some sort of a concoction in an old bottle that he made up at home, and you didn't ask any questions, and he just rubbed that into you, and anyone that wanted a rub got a rub. And that's the kind of character you're dealing with. Like, he played in the 47 county final at Tullaroan and won. So that's the kind of time span you're talking about with this guy. Just an absolute brilliant character. And like, if you shook his hand, you'd be there for 10 minutes and you'd be questioning your toughness after, because you'd have a sore hand coming off. So yeah, he was one of these guys, and just really, I suppose he was a role model. Like, people, speak about us guys that, we love where we're from in Tullaroan. Well, we got that from the likes of him, because he was just a Tullaroan man out and out, and he was the role model for all of us.
Tommy, great stuff this morning. Thanks a million for joining us.
Thanks, guys.
Tommy Walsh giving us some thoughts this morning about the hurling championship. I hope it kicks off.
It will, Ger. Yeah, it's like you can't really base anything on 3 rounds of games either, and like, you can probably make some extenuating circumstances. Galway are not at full tilt yet. I think the conditions were bad.
I think that we shouldn't understate the crapness of the Galway weather generally.
It was like, as I said, we've had a Mediterranean climate in Ireland the last while. Quick ground in Ballinrobe, but it was bad. Salt Hill is terrible. Salt Hill is a shocking venue. It should never have been redeveloped. Full stop. They should have developed Tuam Stadium and Kenny Park or somewhere like that.
It appears to have been built on an Indian burial ground or something. The weather's always bad when teams play there.
It's a funeral. It's a funeral crowd trying to get in as well. It's like absolute chaos trying to get there. I'm from East Galway, right? If I were to go to a Galway game in Croke Park or a game in Pearse Stadium that was busy, I'd get to Croke Park quicker. Genuinely, like, because that's how bad traffic is in Galway. It would take maybe 2 hours thereabouts to get to Croke Park. It would take more on a bad day to get to Salt Hill.
And the land must be worth a fortune now. Surely they could sell it to some developer and redevelop somewhere else.
Like, I've made this point a million times, where the thinking was to redevelop Salt Hill when Tuam was a town that was left behind in the recession, that really needed. Tuam is a spiritual home of Galway football, always was, always will be. Tuam Stadium is into a state of dilapidation. It could have been developed into a modern 30,000 seater ground. Mayo fans love coming there. It's very convenient. I remember as a kid, never any problems with traffic or anything going into Tuam. It really helped, like, the town be vibrant. The last thing Galway needed was more traffic. Galway is not in football. It's not. I would argue Galway is not even a sports city, really. It's a culture city. Soccer has never really taken off there. It's not a hurling city. It's not really a Gaelic football city. It's turned to rugby because maybe rugby's obviously doing very well. But they should have developed, in my view, Athenry or even Ballinasloe as a hurling ground, and 100% developed Tuam. And I think 90% of Galway football fans agree with me on that. And Salt Hill is a nightmare. And Sunday there was no help at all with obviously the breeze coming in from the Atlantic.
I presume that's horses bolted, and this is all. They're not going to change anything now.
Yeah, unless, like,
can you fix the traffic? Is there?
Well, the bypass is coming into Galway, but whether that would work on match days, I don't know. Galway's a very unique city in terms of sort of getting from east to west in Galway has to entail sort of going through the city, which obviously doesn't help. And Connemara, like, is very cut off if you're from the east of Galway. Like, Galway's one county and Ireland's a small place, but Connemara might as well be Azerbaijan for me. It's miles and miles away, and I think the horse has bolted with a view to Salt Hill. I could see what they were trying to do in terms of develop a ground for both codes, but Galway City is not the home of Gaelic games, and it's certainly not the home of football.
All right, let's move on and talk about the Europa League Final. Gary Breen is with us this morning. Gary, how you doing?
I'm well, thanks, guys. Good morning.
2 all-English affairs this week to look forward to. I saw various people hoping that the Champions League Final won't be a Premier League game by any other means, and that actually we'll get a really good final. Let's talk about this game first before we get your thoughts on the Champions League Final, though. What kind of a game do you expect between Arsenal and Chelsea?
To be honest, I expect one full of goals because of the very fact that they both so poor defensively. I think there's match winners throughout the team, great individuals who can turn it in a split second, the likes of Aubameyang for Arsenal, Hazard for Chelsea. But defensively, I can't see those defences keeping those quality players out, so I expect goals.
I presume you've seen the pictures this morning where it's your stars on the back of every newspaper because there was a row in training between David Luiz and Gonzalo Higuain. These things happen all the time. It's not that big a deal. It's just that the photographers were there, right? We shouldn't read too much into this.
No, they do happen all the time, and the problem we have is that Sarri's so demonstrative. Rather than just keeping it in-house, he makes a big show of it. I think that Chelsea tried to put a little bit of spin and say that his frustration was born out of the fact they couldn't do their set pieces. That's a nonsense. But we've seen it before with Sarri in terms of the League Cup final. What you have to say is that since that game, he has changed his philosophy. He's altered that Sarri ball, and it's made him more direct, more defensively sound. So they have finished the season strongly. You have to say, looking at finishing third in the Premier League is an incredible achievement.
The line's not great there, Gary. We'll call you. We'll give you a quick call back straight away, and we'll be back over to you in 2 seconds.
Sounds like he actually was in Baku there.
Yeah.
Remember as a kid when Ireland would be playing in Albania or places like that, that grainy footage, and
call in on the phone.
Tony Cascarino maybe grabbing a kind of a smash and grab goal to win in Tirana in the old communist days. They were the days. But Gary sounds a bit like that this morning.
Yeah. Normally Skype is better than 1980s quality ISDN.
Normally.
Even 90s. What do you think is going to happen in this game?
It's hard. I think Gary's point is valid about defences. Maybe Arsenal might want a little bit more. Although do Arsenal really want anything? It's hard to call. I think it'll be a good game.
Okay, Gary's back. In terms of who wants it more, I think it definitely appears as if the Maurizio Sarri era is coming to a close, and that this is the last 24 hours of it. But where are we with Unai Emery one season in?
I think initially when he came in, I think it was always going to be tough in terms of the quality of the squad that he inherited. But I think at times I think he's done a really good job. He's changed everything in terms of discipline. He's brought up more fitness levels to Arsenal. They're more accountable for their performances. Tactically astute. I think he doesn't just play one certain way. He addresses who he's playing the opposition in a way that Wenger never did. But in terms of so many problems that he inherited, the only thing I will say is that he's failed to solve a lot of them, notably that defensive issue. But it's a difficult one. They don't have the financial muscle. He's inherited players who are not really good enough for Arsenal to be challenged at the top of the Premier League, and he's done as well as he can. There was a period there where they looked like they could finish third, and I would argue they're the sixth best team in the Premier League, yet they finished fifth. So you can look at it, and I think for both managers, I think we'll determine whether or not they've been successful by who wins this particular final.
It's weird that way, but it does define the season for both these managers. Sarri surely can't continue on next season, though. I don't know if you saw the Marcus Alonso comments during the week about he never played football, so it's kind of difficult for us to listen to what he has to say. But we got there because we're professionals. And you're like, if you're talking like that, I mean, that guy.
It's a typical one for that Chelsea changing room. We've seen it so often over the years. The only difference is that the likes of Alonso don't have the weight that Terry, Lampard, those guys had before. Alonso's probably not happy because he's been discarded a little bit. But Sarri has definitely, his biggest problem is not necessarily his disconnection with the players, which is in stark contrast to what Klopp, Pochettino, Pep have, that they idolise their manager. He just doesn't have that connection. But more worryingly, he doesn't have the connection with the supporters. And they're a club of supporters who are used to being in crisis. They've seen managers come and go, but they've just not taken to him one bit, and I just can't see this continuing. And the very fact that he was so adamant about continuing with his Sarri ball, and now the fact that he's changed it shows that I just don't think it's a good marriage.
So, is Frank Lampard a realistic possibility for this, or is that just pie in the sky?
To be honest, I think it is a realistic one, but you're quite right to suggest why would you look at it bearing in mind his body of work. We've seen what's happened at Manchester United in terms of getting a fan's favourite back. I think Frank Lampard is probably destined for a top managerial career, but to give him the job one season in is a massive gamble, and I don't think you do it for any other reason than his connection with the club. I'm not discounting the fact that he has the ability to make it happen. He would bring Jody Morris back as a coach, who's obviously coached throughout the Chelsea ranks, but Chelsea will be very different next summer. Obviously, the fact that Hazard will leave, they might have to bring those young players through, the likes of Abraham from Aston Villa, the likes of Mason Mount back from Derby. Obviously, Hudson-Odoi will come back fitness. Loftus-Cheek's getting his game now. Chelsea's a very different club now, and it's probably the reason why Hazard will leave, because it's certainly not the club that he joined when he initially came in 7 years ago as Champions League winners.
Yeah, I actually feel like it's more likely than not that Frank Lampard will be the next manager at this stage.
It is absolutely absurd that Frank Lampard should even be talked about here. If you did a poll, Gary, right, this would be interesting now, and this just shows how stupid most people are and a lot of footballers are. If you did a poll and you're a Chelsea fan, who would you prefer to be the next boss, Frank Lampard or Rafa Benitez? It'll probably be 80% Lampard, right? 90, and that just shows how stupid people are.
Well, listen, Benitez has been there before, won the Europa League with them, but that was an incredible decision to give him the job, bearing in mind the massive rivalry that they had, Chelsea, during that period in the Champions League with Liverpool. So there's nothing beyond this Chelsea hierarchy in terms of who they'll choose.
Yeah, I don't know. I just feel like there's there's a kind of a bit of a disconnect between Abramovich and the fans and the club at the minute, and actually getting back a fan's favourite like that would be a good way for him to rekindle his own interest in this thing that he spent so much money on.
I'm not. I mean, Gary mentioned Solskjaer. There would be obvious parallels. I think Solskjaer's CV was worse than Lampard's in terms of Lampard's only been there for such a short space of time and has done a good job. Solskjaer had done a sort of a patchy job at a couple of clubs, but he was a fan's favourite. But a job as big as Chelsea, you can't give it to, like Frank Lampard. You prove virtually nothing in one season of football. You have to assess things over a longer spell of time.
Yeah, we need to see how he evolves and develops. Can he
deal with crises and so forth?
Yeah, exactly. And can he improve players over a consistent period of time, as opposed to just that immediate first rush where it's like, oh, that guy's Frank Lampard, I'm really impressed with your playing.
Absolutely.
For Frank Lampard, it'll be a massive season next year for him at Derby, because he used the loan system brilliantly well to produce a young, vibrant team, got them in the playoffs. But those players will go now. And it'll be a test now of his recruitment ability, his coaching ability, to see whether or not he can repeat that and get Derby into the playoffs.
How do these two teams match up then in terms of the style of play? And I know you expect goals at both ends, but certainly tactically and personnel-wise, do you give Chelsea just that little edge, given that they do have slightly better players at the moment?
I give Chelsea the edge because they've got Hazard. I think he's a brilliant player. I think we've been blessed to see him in the Premier League. His stats are incredible. The very fact he didn't get in the Premier League team of the season is absolute nonsense, bearing in mind the amount of goals he was involved in and other players getting in ahead of him. I don't see Arsenal having the ability to stop them, but that's been the case. Listen, Arsenal have only lost one of their last 8 meetings against Chelsea, so long gone are those days of Drogba bullying Chelsea. But still, I just look at Hazard as being a potential match winner. I'll be fascinated to see what Emery does again. I think the very fact that he often goes to a 5 to protect his team defensively kind of is one that never really I understand, to be perfectly honest, because if you haven't got 2 good centre-halves, why pick 3? And I understand that safety in numbers as such, but the very fact that if you often go to a 5, you end up having Kolasinac at wing-back, and he can't defend as a full-back, let alone a wing-back. So they'll be vulnerable there, especially when you think of the quality that Chelsea have in those second line of attack with the likes of Hazard, Willian, Pedro, those type of guys. I think Arsenal will probably look to stop Jorginho playing. I think a lot of teams have done that to stop that Sarri ball, but even Sarri now has missed out Jorginho quite a lot recently. I think his passing stats are well down since the League Cup final, where they have changed. They've gone more direct. They've defended deeper. They don't look to play so much football that don't really hurt people. They try and get the ball forward. So if you do that against Arsenal and don't give them time to get their defensive shape, you will create chances, there's no doubt.
The difference for Arsenal of being in the Champions League next season and not being in the Champions League,
massive.
It is, isn't it? Because it's a financial thing. It just releases it means that the hierarchy are happy to invest because they realise that there's extra revenue coming in automatically. And it's not like there's any benefit of losing tonight, because you still have to go on those foreign trips on Thursday nights in the Europa League, which is actually more draining than playing on the Tuesday or Wednesday when it comes to your next league game. So it's kind of a vicious circle if you're trapped at this Europa League level where you can never break into the next tier.
They've played 15 games this season now, and as of Chelsea, it's insane how big the Europa League is, and just attracting players as well, Gary. I mean, how big is this if you want to come to the Premier League next year?
Well, Arsenal making out that they've still got that kudos that they can attract people, bearing in mind they're in London and the Premier League. I don't buy into it so much, because the very fact, if they don't win this and don't qualify for the Champions League, they're going to have to reduce their wages at a time when their rivals in the Premier League are going to start paying more. So the goal's going to be massive. Even in terms of the players they're linked to. If they get Champions League football, there's talk then that they can get Zaha from Crystal Palace. If they don't make it, then they're looking for Fraser from Bournemouth. So you can see the difference there. They have to find value in the transfer market. There's no doubt about it. They don't have that financial muscle. And, that Europa League, that Thursday night football is often what Arsenal fans used to call Spurs' competition. But now look at Tottenham, they're in the Champions League final. So it is absolutely a dreadful time to be an Arsenal fan right now.
This summer is going to be really interesting and obviously so much depends on whether or not they are in the Champions League, but in terms of what Emery can do to completely revamp the squad and get his players in. So it's been a management job of the resources that he, as you've already talked about, inherited with a few signings. But this is the summer where we get to judge him, where he's had his scouts have been working with the information that he has about his current playing squad, and he gets to tell everybody, this is exactly the type of player I want.
Well, I always felt that this was going to be a massive summer for Arsenal, and bearing in mind they're putting that infrastructure, not just for the manager and what players they could get, but behind the scenes. But then Gazidis makes the decision to get the manager in and departs himself for AC Milan and learned nothing from the debacle of what's happened at United with Ferguson and Gill leaving at the same time. So he's really left Arsenal high and dry. Then we see Mislintat coming in from the Bundesliga, who's considered this diamond eye of a recruitment person. He's been and gone. So they've still got problems behind the scenes. And that's the biggest worry, is that there won't be any really thought process in terms of what they want to do in terms of getting Arsenal back to the top. There is value out there in terms of players available. You may look at the likes of Fabian Delph from City, who's available on a free transfer. He'll give you legs and energy, and without that massive financial investment. So they've got to be really acute in the transfer market.
Yeah, okay. A brief word about the Champions League final then. This remove of what are we, the middle of the week, and it's obviously Saturday evening. The Harry Kane question hangs heavy over what's going to happen. I find it very hard to believe that Harry Kane is going to be match fit, and so therefore I wouldn't start him irrespective of what he says.
Never played the game though.
I've never played the game. It's true. What would you do, Gary?
Well, listen, I'd agree with you. Listen, if you to speak to Harry Kane, he will convince you, and he will be telling his teammates, his managers, I'm fit, I'm the best shape I've ever been. Of course he will, because he wants to play in the Champions League final. Pochettino's too cute for that. He'll recognise whether or not he is. Listen, he's put him in earlier than most people would have assumed, because he's aware of the stats. He'll have done all the research in terms of what numbers he's hitting throughout training, whether or not he is there. But obviously the motion of the whole tie. Listen, when Son plays without Harry Kane, he's a different player. So I wouldn't be surprised if Kane doesn't start but makes an impact off the bench.
That makes sense, doesn't it? That's the right way to do this. It's not like you don't have players who are in form, who are capable of leading the line. It's not like it was 2 seasons ago when nobody was playing well alongside Harry Kane, and it was Harry Kane. It was the Harry Kane team, as Pep Guardiola called it. It's not that anymore.
No, it isn't. Listen, it seems a crazy thing to say that without Harry Kane and all these goals, that Tottenham have actually got better results as such, but they have. And the very fact that Son is a different play, it becomes slightly marginalised when he's in the team with Harry Kane. He's got a different role to play. So Pochettino will be aware of that. He'll know that Son's energy will be needed against Liverpool in terms of trying to exploit the spaces that Liverpool's fullbacks will vacate. You'll need energy to do that. I'm not sure if Kane has that for a full 90 minutes, and so probably will be introduced later on.
Is it insane to think that Spurs might consider cashing in at Harry Kane this summer?
Oh, no, I can't see it. I'll tell you why, because I think he's desperate to be at Tottenham, to be the captain. I know they say he's one of their own, which is strange, bearing in mind he was at Arsenal as a kid and was an Arsenal supporter. But I can't see that happening, no. I know like Real Madrid are having a major reboot. They want to get players in. They've been identified as getting Hazard in. Whether or not they could get Harry Kane to lead the line remains to be seen. But I think Harry Kane will certainly be at Tottenham for the next couple of seasons, bearing in mind that new stadium as well.
One last question here is about the impact that a training ground blowout has on a team. Is it a good thing or a bad thing? I have vague recollections of when you guys got to, where was the training camp after Saipan? It was in Japan. Doesn't Robbie Keane smack Niall Quinn across the face?
Oh, cry! I had no idea which way you were going to go there. I thought it was just going to be the age-old Saipan. No.
After that, it's like the lesser-known internal spat. It was like there was definitely. I don't know if it's the snappers called it or something, but and it was all grand. No one, it was just that was Robbie being Robbie.
Well, listen, if it did happen, I cannot for the life of me remember it. I'll be honest with you.
Does it matter? Do these things matter?
No, they don't. Listen, I've had you've had.
Go on. You were about to tell us specifically.
Listen, I've had it with managers. Well, physical confrontations. It's just part and parcel of it. The big thing is can you just put it to the side, or does it linger? That's the problem you have as a player with other players or with your manager. But at times, you've got something to say. The other person maybe has something, and just settle it as quick as you can. Yeah.
So you got physical managers and live to tell the tale.
Listen, it's a long career.
Gary. Come on, Gary.
Listen, you can see the scar, so listen, I'm still here.
All right, good stuff, Gary. Thanks a million for joining us.
Thank you very much, guys. Good luck.
He's passed the book there, hasn't he?
There you go. Refusing to tell which of the managers he popped right in the kisser.
The next poll should be which
of these managers did.
Yeah. It'll be interesting.
Well, you can see, so many of those managers want that, don't they? Like at that generation in particular.
I know.
Pulis.
Roy Keane definitely used to do that. He used to instigate kind of rows.
I know, with Johnny Walters, in fairness.
Just to get them going, yeah.
Brave man taking on Johnny Walters.
Yeah.
Brave /
I genuinely wouldn't read that much into it. It's a nice bit of a sideshow as well for the like people will be talking about that now, and like it's nice.
When they win the trophy, they'll be the first over to each other. Yeah, and it's a good narrative.
It was pre-planned.
Zita Retticelli on YouTube says, yes, Mighty Reds will dominate the Spurs, at least 3-0 win, maybe more.
It's possible.
A blowout win for either of these teams would be a good Champions League final.
I'm just a small bit worried, and this is probably based on nothing from Liverpool's perspective, that they beat them twice in the league, and I think it's
hard to beat a team 3 times.
It's probably based on nothing, but it's just Spurs.
It's not. It's like 2 out of 3, 3 out of 3 times. If you are making odds before a 3-part series between Liverpool and Spurs, the odds on a clean sweep for Liverpool are very, very long.
They are. The only thing is we're not there now. We're 2 games in, and it's an individual game. But I think Spurs will just garner so much belief from the Ajax game, and they'll go in there fully believing they can beat Liverpool. And let's remember the game in Anfield. They fluked that win, really.
Yeah, they totally did. And I think that so that would make me even more confident that there's something going to happen here. From a Spurs, it would give me comfort as a Spurs fan.
Funny enough, that I remember watching the tail end of that game after coming back from Croke Park when it was the league final, and you're thinking of Mayo kind of never really win anything, Spurs just never really win anything, but I'd have more faith in Spurs kind of winning something than Mayo at the moment, but it's going to be a great final.
How much do the Galway fans enjoy the Mayo suffering?
Depends on what side of Galway you're from. If you're from where I'm from, you'd prefer to see Mayo beat Roscommon than Roscommon to beat Mayo. If you're from the kind of Mayo border, you'd be very much pro Roscommon, but I think a lot of people in Galway would be very, very happy for Anthony Cunningham as well, and more people in Galway would think we've a better chance of beating Roscommon than Mayo, so they particularly...
It was a win-win-win for them.
Particularly happy, but I'd be very, very wary of Roscommon. There's Galway, I don't know, there's still misgivings in Galway about the way we play football, and Roscommon have beat us very, very recently, and we've actually a better record against Mayo. I think that'll be a very interesting county final, but where Mayo go from here is going to be fascinating. It's one thing I would agree with Joe Brolly when he said, he made the point about Mayo's kind of Mayo's downfall is probably more enjoyable than anyone else winning in terms of a narrative, because it's just here we go again.
Their arc.
It's just like,
where's my arc?
How can you do it?
I want to play you this. It's Luke Edwards live from Baku on the show last night, talking about what he thinks is going to become of Maurizio Sarri at Chelsea. We'll talk Declan Rice and Niall Quinn on the other side of this. Have a look.
Like, has Sarri's future been decided? Is he staying? Is it like, whether they win 3-0 or lose 3-0, is there still a big question mark over whether or not he's staying?
I think there's a question mark. My feeling will be that he stays. Chelsea are a club that don't really do stability, aren't they? And it's been a model that they believe works for them. And actually, you can't really argue because they seem to change the manager and then win the Premier League, and then change the manager and then win the Premier League again. So Conte won the Premier League and the FA Cup in his 2 seasons, and that wasn't deemed good enough. The problem Chelsea will probably have is I think they're going to have to readjust what sort of football club they are, because they were Man City, weren't they? They were the Manchester City 10 years ago. They were the ones with more money. They inflated the transfer market. They effectively bought up all the best players, and even to make them sit on their bench so that rival teams couldn't get them. And we all said all these things that we're saying about Manchester City now about Chelsea. They're not that club anymore. And what they do have is a fantastic youth system. They've produced a lot of players who aren't getting any game time now. Is Sarri the manager who is going to give those young players a chance? Is he going to bring them through? I think that will be the question that needs to be answered, because with their transfer ban, they are probably going to have to lean quite heavily, and I see that as an opportunity for Chelsea rather than a punishment. Actually, I think they've got a real chance to bring through a new generation of homegrown players, and I was sort of forced, their hand has been forced, but I think it could actually benefit them in the long run. The problem with Sarri, and one of the criticisms of him this season, is that he hasn't given those young players a chance. He started to towards the end of the season, so we shall see. Personally, I think Sarri should stay. I think to get rid of a manager who, as you say, finished third in the Premier League behind probably 2 of the best Premier League sides we've ever seen, in his first season in a new country, learning a new style of football. Yes, it's not sensational, but it's certainly very solid and very respectable. I think for him to lose his job after that, I think would be extremely harsh.
It would be harsh, but it's Chelsea, so I don't know. It feels like we're entering the end of the Maurizio Sarri era anyway, for sure, at this stage. So we want to move on and talk a little bit about the Niall Quinn consortium. It's being called a consortium. Consortiums generally take things over. Is this a takeover attempt by this group that Niall Quinn has put forward, or is it actually slightly different?
Well, they would probably say it isn't, but it is. It probably is. But you speak to people in the League of Ireland about this. There is still a lot of ambiguity about who's involved, why they are involved, what their long-term plan is. Paul Lennon in the Star today has broken down Quinn's apparent manifesto into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 bullet points, which I think really is well worth reading the article. But Quinn's consortium is believed to be keen to address the following issues. Stress that it is keen to work along with UEFA to build a new FAI and a new Irish football business. That's a key point, business. To stymie the attempt by the FAI old guard to continue in power. I don't think anyone could really disagree with that. Ensure that the GRG actually instigates real reform. To disassociate itself with the rumour that it supports Noel Mooney's interim FAI job, which again we can see why. Target improved government's investment in Irish football by tapping into the cash raised by the tax on sports betting. That's a very, very key point because...
Quinn's talked about this a good bit, right?
Yeah, but
there's a tax on sports betting at the minute, which is on all sports betting, and most of it goes to the racing industry. Is that right?
Racing and Greyhound basically gets it, and that's a completely anachronistic means of providing funding for racing, because in those days people essentially bet on horses and very little else, whereas now that's completely changing.
It's changing, but it hasn't, as far as I know, you talk to any of the big gambling firms and they say that racing still makes up the vast majority of their book, that football's growing, but that it's growing off a tiny base and it's still relatively small. Like it's not nowhere near 50-50.
Oh, but racing's no longer vast majority. It's not. And you see all the new firms that are trying to get into the market. It's not for racing they're getting in. It's in running live sports. That's where it's at. It's not, and it's like Asian markets and stuff like that. Racing is
percentage turnover. I'm sure
increasingly smaller. I don't know the figure
50%, now. 50%, and higher than that for some of the firms.
It would vary firm to firm, but. I've spoken to people in racing about this. The government puts in a lot of money into racing, and the point has been made that it's supporting an industry, a rural Ireland-based industry. The FAI and the League of Ireland have to govern over a football industry in Ireland. Football has to become an industry where people are paid to work here. You can imagine all the filter down money that could come from people not going to games in England as much and just staying here, and young players staying here, and also just clubs with academies and all that, and that's their plan. And the other two things are involve private investors in the provision of facilities and employment of coaches. I believe Quinn's consortium has gotten some very good private investors on board, and the last one, which I'm particularly intrigued by, is the long-term establishment of an All-Ireland League, which I think absolutely must happen, but it's probably a little bit away.
It's probably not that far away, is it? It's the type of thing that you would get a lot of support from the right number of clubs, and then it's a breakaway league, right? And all of a sudden you need UEFA and FIFA to say that's okay, because obviously, unfortunately, it's a cross-border thing.
Do you know what I think will bring about an All-Ireland League?
Brexit.
And I think if Brexit happens, I hope Brexit happens on the basis that I would love to see United Ireland for many reasons, but I think Brexit will accelerate that. I think Brexit will be an absolute shit show in the north. Scotland will declare independence, and then the north will probably follow. Whether an All-Ireland League will precede that is hard to say, because the northern clubs would definitely be subservient to the southern ones at the moment in terms of quality, and 8 European places will become 4. I don't think that's a solid enough argument to stop it. I think, it's 2 hours from, I was talking about me getting to Salt Hill from East Galway, it's 2 hours from Dublin to Belfast max at the moment.
We might even get better cross-border roads.
We might even get better cross-border roads. They might even build a proper road to Derry.
Imagine that.
Which was something that...
Or to Donegal.
Or for Donegal. Maybe we might even get the old railways back, but an All-Ireland League would be amazing. I was making the... I actually have the clubs I mentioned here, because I was saying it to a couple of lads. One of the aforementioned lads from Belfast, and a mate from Galway. I obviously included Galway United in the All Ireland League teams, but I was saying if you have a 12-team division, Derry City, Glentoran, Linfield, Cliftonville, Bohemians, St Patrick's, Shamrock Rovers, Dundalk, Cork City, Waterford, Limerick, obviously Galway United, who are second from bottom or third from bottom in the first division at the moment, and then you'd have 2 regional first divisions that would make them kind of in terms of
conferences.
So it'd be maybe be a north and south. That wouldn't be divided on political, on borderlines.
So Finn Harps, if they were there.
Exactly. So Finn Harps, and maybe bring the likes of Monaghan United back. But that'd be my plan. But imagine, like, I think if you got like Guinness to sponsor the Guinness Super All-Ireland League, so something like that, a Gemston All-Ireland League, get cross-border money in, peace money from the EU, blah, 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 blah. So much potential. Like, the League of Ireland is surviving without any prize money and no TV money at the moment, and doing very well in my view for that.
Who'd win?
Who'd win the All-Ireland League? It would definitely be a team from the south. They're miles off in the north at the moment.
So then why would the north be like, no, we're going to come down and get our asses handed to us by you guys on a weekly basis, and so you can lord it over? No thanks.
It's either that or playing a Mickey Mouse League in a small province that's really going nowhere. And I think that it has huge potential. Like
Ulster says no.
Ulster says no. There would be an element of that, but you know. Never. My mate has made the point that never. Like, you know, we saw Ian Paisley's wife come out and say partition should never have happened, really, or was certainly a regrettable decision, or something that maybe shouldn't have happened. And if Ian Paisley's wife can say that, why can't we have an All-Ireland League? But for the greater picture, if people in this country are happy with Irish football, north and south, in terms of the league, clubs, being what they've been for the last any amount of years, if they don't have ambition bigger than that, then they shouldn't be involved in the game. And I think whatever Quinn's motivations are, I think his ambition is there.
Yeah, so what needs to happen now? Because I've been reading, Dan has said that in one of his pieces during the week that there's like, I can't remember the exact phrase, but to paraphrase, there's discombobulation in League of Ireland circles that some of the grand poobahs have not had their sit down with Quinn.
Quinn, yeah. Dan McDonald had a very good piece on, I think it was yesterday, just kind of a lot of bullet points really summing up what's going on. Their meeting on Friday, you know, Shane Ross's role in it is quite opportunistic, considering he was lauding Delaney as far back as last December.
Yeah.
I think he's a bit of a catastrophe to be involved in any shape or form in sport. So this maybe hasn't been handled that well, but I know Kieran Foley is one of Quinn's main kind of guys. He's strong League of Ireland connections. The League of Ireland clubs probably feel in a much more self-confident place than they have for some time, because when you think about it, how did they let a situation go by where the FAI was probably taking money from the League of Ireland, actually literally taking money, because the League of Ireland clubs were putting in money in terms of licensing fees and getting back. No, the League of Ireland clubs didn't know how much SSE or Tricity, and still don't, were putting into the League of Ireland, because they entered into a confidentiality agreement with the John Delaney-led FAI. And when you think about that, and you think about the money that's in this country, and the Quinn Group has made this point, in particular Kieran Foley, the money that the likes of Google and Amazon and Facebook and Twitter have based in Ireland, that they could like lash money into Irish football and they wouldn't even notice it off the balance sheet. And we've been so
okay, so there's a bit in that, because like, why Google didn't get rich giving their money away, right? So you need to create a compelling product that's going to be a reason for them to get involved, and there are definitely ways to access pots of cash from sponsorship of the global companies who are headquartered here. But why aren't the League of Ireland, why are they suspicious of what Quinn's doing instead of engaging with them and saying, you need to come to us? There's a lot of posturing going on from a lot of different people going, well, I haven't had my authority respected here. And you're like, this isn't the mafia. Just pick up the phone, make a phone call and go, here, listen, I hear you're doing this thing. Is this good for us or bad for us?
Yeah,
what's our role?
I don't think anyone... I mean, it would have been fairly simple. Everyone in the League of Ireland would know somebody that Niall Quinn knows, or certainly the clubs would have said, like, I want to give Niall a call here, and I'm sure Niall would have answered. I think maybe some of his ideas are a bit far-fetched, that he's spoken about bringing in players from Brazil so that they could use Ireland as a pathway to playing in for the likes of Britain or in Europe. And again, Brexit will be key to the future of Irish football. But you know, when you go back to the field and you know, being wary of outsiders, there is a slight element of paranoia in the League of Ireland, because the League of Ireland has been such a kind of an enclave in terms of the Irish sporting narrative for so long. We are necessarily wary of people coming in and
here's your chance.
And here's your chance. Yeah, grand, but like, what are the motivations? Do they want to get wealthy by developing players and sending them on to Britain? Who's going to run the game over here? Personally, I'd be...
What are the motivations of the League of Ireland clubs? And how are they putting together their best foot forward to try and influence what's going to happen next in Irish football?
Yeah, well, they've, in fairness to the League of Ireland clubs, their league has been run by the FAI. And, I mean, anyone that could talk about what the FAI has been under the John Delaney regime, the League of Ireland clubs have probably lost sight of why they're even there, and if they've entered into agreements that really weren't beneficial, because I think the League of Ireland clubs with the FAI is a little, I've made this analogy before, but it is a bit like a homeless fella being offered a bed for the night and things saying, I'm not sure about the mattress, it's a little bit on the weak side, because the League of Ireland has been so dysfunctional for so long and so beaten down that it was kind of happy to go along with whatever the FAI said. But necessarily there is suspicion, but I think the League of Ireland clubs are running themselves a lot better as well, and the big thing, some of them, yeah. But the big feeling now is that the number of players who are making it to the Premier League from Ireland is so small that the prospect of professional players, and we see Jack Byrne and Talbot from Bows get into Ireland squads recently, the prospect of Ireland players regularly being coming from League of Ireland clubs is really not far away, because it's already happening at an underage level.
All right, it's 8:42 this morning. Phil Egan is on the way with a roundup of the morning's sports news. We're going to bring you this first, though. It's more from Telegraph journalist Luke Edwards on last night's show from Baku.
So the importance of this game, Arsenal, who finished 5th in the Premier League, pretty important to them.
Yeah, I think it's important to both of them. I think that the winners tomorrow night can say they've had a really successful season, actually, particularly Chelsea. I mean, Chelsea finished 3rd in Sarri's first season, and if they were to win what is effectively the second most prestigious trophy that you can win in Europe, and that English clubs compete for every season, if you take the view that European competition is more prestigious than your domestic league. So I think Chelsea would have had an excellent season, actually, if they were to win this. And for Arsenal, there is that feeling, if they were to come away empty-handed, then what exactly has improved under Unai Emery? They remain a team that are outside of the top 4. For me, they haven't really improved this season markedly since Wenger left, and I think there will always be. Yes, it was time for a change with Wenger. I think probably everybody knew that, but I don't think Unai Emery has done fantastically well in his first season. When you consider that Sarri is the one who's had all the criticism and has had his own fans chanting for him to go, and the rather rude words says about Sarri ball from your own supporters, to finish 3rd and then being with a chance of winning the Europa League, I think there'll be a few people kind of regretting that a little bit, and I think there'll be a few people who are eating their words if they were to win tomorrow night. I think for Arsenal, they need to win to save their season, effectively. Yeah,
we keep putting the picture up there from Baku of the 3 Chelsea players and the 3 Arsenal players, and Olivier Giroud is one of the Chelsea players that UEFA have decided to hero in the photograph, and you're like,
slightly opportunistic.
Yeah, or else somebody, are we ready? Is that where Chelsea are? Olivier Giroud is one of the 3 players you're picking for the photograph?
Unsung hero.
He did play for Arsenal.
I know, but like, I mean,
I don't know. I think the fact that he played for Arsenal.
Can you stick that back up? Did they even have Eden Hazard?
They don't
have Hazard.
No.
Here.
No.
Ribbon off his cheek there.
The work experience person obviously is like, oh, here's 3 players. Jesus, that makes no sense.
Yeah, the Hazard one is a bit of an omission, all right.
Yeah, because he's kind of famous. Phil, how are you?
Good, yeah, all good.
How are you?
Yeah,
I want to know.
My legs are they're all right. Like I struggled to sleep last night though.
You got the posts.
Yeah, I went training again last night with my the triathlon club in ECD. Yeah, do you know what? Like,
don't be trying to tell people if they do exercise. It's the exact opposite. The more exercise you do, the better you'll sleep, Phil. It's just you're just new to your regime.
Yeah, my legs are on fire.
Late as well.
Yeah. But what I mean is though, it helps to train in a group, because there was times last night where we were doing miles, like, and you do a mile, then you take a 2-minute break. So by the time you do the 3rd mile, it's getting that bit tougher. But if you're in a group and
get together,
it kind of pairs groups in with ability almost. So
right.
you know, there's somebody that you're kind of losing them, but then you see them and you're thinking, no, I got to keep up with them, and kind of pushes you.
You can't stop.
You can't stop. You don't want to let the team down. And
I stopped on the cycle once, I'm not going to lie.
That's going to be the approach on the day. We can't stop.
Yeah.
And where are we now?
15th of June. So I've been told as well, like, the first 500 metres of the run in Dunmore East
is uphill.
Ooh. So I've got to start trying to practice my hill runs. Now I'm going to Achill this weekend. A lot of hills there.
So are you going to be running, or are you going to be like having the crack?
I'll probably do all my running before the Champions League final. Let's just say that.
Have you now got to the position where you think running is a bit of crack? Is the bug biting you?
Yeah, well, I think on the day as well. I think yourself and Adrian and the other team as well, you'll enjoy the day itself.
Yeah.
The competition, the afterwards.
Chasing down my prey.
Yeah. Like you'd be there thinking, as you're cycling by Owen Sheehan, you'd be just going, never liked your power rankings.
Poor Owen. He's full of the trash talk, and there he is now, over in Barcelona, leaving an important part of his brain somewhere in a field at.
Does Ackland involve Kevin Kilban?
Kevin, I met Kevin out west last weekend.
That's his neck of the woods, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. My wife is from Ackles, so.
Isn't the Green Party Sarah McHugh? Isn't she Ackles?
Sarah McHugh, yeah.
Sarah
I met her because there's a connection there where a friend of my wife's family knows Saoirse McHugh, so I met her actually when she was 2 or 3 months ago, and she was talking about her canvassing, and
I'd say her she was polling at like 0 or 1% at that stage probably.
She's also I looked at a promotion video. She seems to be a big fan of her exercise and gym work and all that. So an example to us all.
They had a candidate in the south who was like a former international surfer.
Well,
like a former champion international surfer. Yeah, I didn't know her name. I missed the name, but certainly she had an amazing backstory. So anyway, a reminder that we're not just talking about this for no reason. We're trying to raise much needed funds for Pieta House. #Try for Pieta. It's all in association with BMW, who of course are proud partners of Triathlon Ireland and is the title sponsor of the BMW Triathlon National Series, which is 17 of the most exciting triathlon races in Ireland. They're all over the country. Pretty much now is the kind of the busy season for them. So, but it's not too late at all for you to get off that couch, to get inspired.
How are you getting on, John?
Channel your inner Phil, not your inner me or Owen. And
how are you getting on?
Well, my regime has improved. I've given up coffee.
You've given up coffee?
Yeah, I replaced it for the first month with chocolate. I've now given up chocolate as well, so I'm getting there.
Why did you give up coffee?
Headaches. I was having 3 double espressos for breakfast.
Wow.
And you're coming on the show.
There, yeah. I do that every morning pretty much.
Yeah. There's 2 weeks of intense irritability and headaches. But then after that you start to sleep better. So even your bad night's sleep now is better than a good night's sleep.
I'm not a good sleeper. But
Did you ever put the two things together?
I've tried to drink coffee earlier in the day and not drink after sort of 6.
I had all that, but
if you had to give up booze or coffee, which would be easier?
I mean, giving up coffee would be easier, right? Everybody likes the booze.
I'd find it very hard now to give up coffee, I have to say.
It's doable. You just have to decide that you're going to do it. Definitely feel much better. But maybe booze is next. I haven't quite matched that with the physical exertion that you're supposed to do when you're training, but that's going to happen, right? That's just like just a natural thing. I am trying to take the stairs at least once a day. Shut up, Johnny.
Don't overdo it.
I used to do that here because
Have you walked up the stairs in this building?
I live on the 5th floor and I always take the lift.
If you go to the 5th floor in this building, and I used to do a thing first thing in the morning, I'd try and run up the stairs.
In here?
Yeah.
Wow.
And I'd get to the 5th floor and I'd be just thinking, what am I doing? Like, I'm wrecked.
It's good for you though.
It is definitely. We could do a competition to see who can get up the 5 flights of stairs the fastest.
Well, I mean, no. Who can not have a cardiac assault I'm struggling to get to the top 3. Anyway, a reminder that if you want to get involved, use the #Try for Pieta. BMW and Triathlon Ireland are challenging us to do this, and that's why we're doing it. But actually, it turns out it's not that hard to get involved. There's loads of different distances you can do, and you can just do a leg of it to get you into it.
I think as well, if you do enjoy it, because the Ironman and triathlons are seriously tough going, but if you do get the bug, like this can get you kind of off your feet and just say, actually, I wouldn't mind. It's a great idea, and it's a fantastic charity as well to get involved with.
We were out cycling and it was good weather. There was this day last week, I think it was last Wednesday, yeah, and it was just a really nice experience, the type of thing that you used to do when you were a child, just cycling for pleasure, as opposed to the rest of your life, which is be here, be this, do this time, and you have no time on your own.
Imagine a world where the Green Party holds a balance of power. Dublin will become like a glorified Amsterdam.
Well, I mean,
on the cycling front anyway.
Yeah, it's certainly the danger that you suffer or you face cycling in Dublin when you get back out there for the first time.
It's dangerous.
And it's terrifying.
I'd say it's terrifying.
It's very dangerous.
I wouldn't even dare do it. That's how terrifying I would find it.
And like, how stupid a situation have we got ourselves in where we can't cycle in the biggest city in Ireland? It's insane.
I wouldn't blame motorists either. I just think it's the way our roads are set up. Because I'm a cyclist and I see cyclists behaving like as if their rules don't exist, particularly if they're delivering food. And motorists just get really pissed off. But it's just the way our roads are set up. They're not set up at all for cyclists. And part of the thrill of cycling in Dublin is that it is very, very dangerous, and you either embrace that or you don't, because it's very dangerous.
That food thing, there was a local county councillor complaining about the food delivery company. Cyclists like, what's this? Never time. What is he talking about? The next day I get hit by one, and I was like, what? How does this happen?
It's amazing. They don't care. And I think the Greens had a...
Well, do you want hot food or not?
This is the thing, but like Deliveroo and so on is a good idea in that like it's cyclists rather than people putting fumes into the air. But I think the Greens had an idea that cyclists can, like they do in other cities, cyclists can turn left at a red light if they're not impeding pedestrians. And it probably makes sense because as a cyclist it is kind of hard not to go with everyone else when they jump the red light, but it just pisses off motorists, I think, so often that they, and pedestrians, and there is a divide there.
Yeah. Peace is coming though.
Yep. Okay, well, we'll start with the Europa League final, the London derby between Arsenal and Chelsea, which will take place 2,500 miles away from London in Baku. Obviously, Arsenal without Henrik Mkhitaryan, he hasn't travelled for security reasons. Arsenal now a win would secure a place in the Champions League next season. Chelsea manager Maurizio Sarri says N'Golo Kante is 50-50 for tonight's final due to a knee injury, and tonight will almost certainly be the last time we see Eden Hazard in a Chelsea jersey. Could be the last time Sarri is in the dugout as Chelsea manager. He's been linked with the Juventus job. Chelsea defender David Luiz said he wouldn't consider this season as a failure even if they lose tonight. Chelsea lost in the League Cup final, finished third in the Premier League, and Luiz says all he wants to see from Chelsea is that they challenge for major honours.
It's not fair if you don't win a trophy, but if you don't fight for titles. Tomorrow is a big title where you want to win, and clubs as Chelsea always want to win a trophy, and also give us the opportunity to start next season fighting for another title against another English team.
Yeah, kicks off at 8 o'clock. Katie Taylor is gearing up for the biggest fight of her pro career. It takes place in the early hours of Sunday morning. Taylor holds the WBA, IBF and WBO lightweight titles, takes on Belgium's Delphine Persoon, and it's a unification bout. 2012 Olympic champion believes unifying the lightweight division would be bigger than winning the gold medal in London 7 years ago, and she says these are the fights that she's always wanted.
To become the undisputed champion of the world is the pinnacle of boxing. This would be the biggest night of my career so far. The Olympics in 2012 was absolutely outstanding, but I think this night would even pass that one out as well. So this is definitely the biggest night of my career, and I cannot wait for it.
That fight obviously is on the undercard of the heavyweight title bout between Anthony Joshua and Andy Ruiz. Joshua's US debut, and we talk about the big three in the heavyweight division, and it just means we're a step further from a Wilder and Joshua fight, because Wilder's announced his next fight. He's the WBC champion, and his next fight's going to be a rematch against Cuban Luis Ortiz. Fought March of last year. Really good fight, actually. Ortiz had Wilder in serious trouble, but Wilder came out round 10, landed the big right hand and finished the fight in devastating fashion.
A rematch of a fight that he's already won, yeah, really?
Exactly. And this is Luis Ortiz, by the way, who was offered the Joshua fight, the biggest purse of his career, but somehow didn't take it. Now, if you fight Joshua, you have to go through VADA. Right. So there was a lot of, that would make you pretty concerned why Ortiz wouldn't take the biggest payday of his pro career.
Something we didn't mention in the news roundup earlier about the Declan Rice being linked with Manchester United story. So the Guardian put up a tweet, Declan Rice's focus fully on West Ham, despite Manchester United rumours, to which Emma Malone replied, this rings a bell. He's going to join Man United, isn't he?
Poor West Ham fans. In fairness, they're going to make loads of money, right? What do we think he will be worth?
In the current climate, 50? You're looking at least 40 anyway, yeah.
40, 50.
Well, he's an England international now.
People have made this point to me who've played the game, if we're going to go down this divide again. Well, he didn't play the game, but a couple of ex-pros have said to me, his passing range is very limited. Like in that he breaks up play and he keeps the ball well, but I remember Kevin Kilbane saying if you have a situation where you can go long and that pass is on, Rice doesn't have it in him. And I just want to say that because I just hate him really for what he's done.
Unlike Luca Connell, he has the range.
He does.
Andrews is telling me he can ping it.
Get him in the team. I'm telling you, get him in the team.
I think he'd be a very good player for Man United, being honest.
So Declan Rice would be. So let me just read you this quote. I know there's speculation, but during the season last year, I just signed a new 5-year contract at West Ham. So my focus is fully on playing for West Ham. I've got a great connection with the fans. The fans love me, and I love them. And that's the way it is at the moment.
Well, of course, as well, West Ham have the forever blowing bubbles or whatever, and you know though he loves catchy anthems and catchy music before games, so maybe that'll...
Yeah, but he could always do his David Brent Simply the Best impression and run out at Man United.
And we talked about Jack Grealish yesterday and his connection with Villa. That's completely different.
Yeah, that's a real thing.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And actually...
I like Jack Grealish.
I know we talk about Grealish and Rice and, you know, the ones that got away.
Yeah.
I think Grealish would have had a bigger impact on the Irish team.
Absolutely, and so I've said this before. I think we're going to lament Jack Grealish who lost way more eventually than we're going to last.
We probably need a real playmaker more than we need a Rice. But I think, in fairness with Grealish, we probably always anticipated what would happen. And
yeah, he didn't come along and kiss the badge.
Yeah.
Shamrock emojis though for the Patrick's Day.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, the Irish blood in him is probably there somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah, my mate was over taking selfies with his dad before the Villa game. Actually, yeah. So
is he a Galway man? Or was his dad a Galway man?
I don't know if Grealish would be a very common name in Galway. I don't think he is. I remember we were at the that gig recently where Harry Kane's cousins were playing music.
Yeah,
I remember you were there. Do you remember in Joe Schmidt was there? Do you remember the interludes, the beautiful Irish music?
Oh yeah.
One of them was definitely Harry Kane's cousin, if not all of them. Yeah, it's good to see you were.
Imagine that. Grealish,
Harry Kane, Declan
Rice, Nathan Redmond.
I wouldn't support the team with Nathan Redmond. He never want to play for us. That's fine. You're allowed not want to play for us, right?
Yeah. Even though we're great.
Best fans in the world.
Bunch of lads.
Last bit.
Yeah, just before I go, Rafa Nadal and Roger Federer both in second round action at the French Open later on, both against German opponents. Nadal going for his 12th title at Roland Garros, takes on Yannick Madden. Federer will take on Oscar Otta, and some of the other matches to watch out for. Joe Wilfried Tsonga takes on Japan's Kei Nishikori, and in the ladies singles, 7th seed Sloane Stephens faces Sarah Sorabes Tormo.
All right, good stuff. Thanks for that, Phil. I hope your ice baths and recovery and protein shakes are going well for you for the rest of the
day. Yeah, we need to get probably could do with a team masseur.
Have you ever done the ice bath?
No.
Yeah, there's a jockey in, what do they call it, cryotherapy? Is it
cryotherapy?
Yeah. One of the riders I actually forget, one of the leading flat riders is intensely doing it in England at the moment, and minus 150 degrees or something.
Yeah.
Pretty cold.
Yeah, that's why I haven't done it.
Up next, we're going to have an update on the latest developments in the George Gibney case. First, though, here's John Gonzalez of The Ringer sharing his thoughts on the future of Warriors head coach Steve Kerr.
And where does Steve Kerr fit into all this? He often pops up in my timeline where he's making far more sense than most of your politicians in an effortless way. And I think we all quite like him for that. So I presume he's fairly fundamental. I know he had back issues which were genuinely very severe. Is he still very hungry to continue? Is he going to be sticking around?
That's also a really good question. I'm not sure the answer to that. I'm with you. I think he's a treasure. I love when he opines on politics and gives a counterpoint to, a difficult time in our country right now. But then beyond that, he's just a really good person to interact with, and I think his players respond to him as a result of that. When I was talking to him earlier in the season, I asked him about his job, and we got into this conversation, and he was saying, I almost feel like my title shouldn't be coach. It should be closer to manager, like in soccer, because I feel like I'm more of a manager of personalities than I am a coach X's and O's of basketball players. And I think when he's in charge of a team that talented, that rings true. So keeping him around would be a key component of their continued success.
Is he good to deal with, John, on a personal level?
Oh, excellent. Yeah, I mean, exactly what you see, in those videos when you could ask him basically anything and he'll offer you a really thoughtful question. I think sometimes with some coaches, Greg Popovich can be like that periodically, but he also can be sort of gruff and austere. And Steve isn't like that at all. You could have a really great conversation with him about just about any topic.
That's the Ringer's John Gonzalez talking with Joe last night about the NBA Finals, which kick off this week, tip-off this weekend. Just on Declan Rice, he would be a good signing for Man United. He's exactly the type of player that they should be signing. They should get him this summer as opposed to waiting another year to see how he develops.
Absolutely. He probably would cost a fair bit of money, but like in horse racing parlance, he is still quite unexposed. You know, he's had one proper full season. I felt Matic was very disappointing this season. Herrera's obviously gone, and that holding midfielder, he's definitely. I'm not saying he would go straight into the team and play every week necessarily. He probably would.
Yeah.
But no, I think I really like him as a player. I think he's exactly what they need.
And if you're Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, you want a bunch of those players who are underexposed, because then you can say, I'm building a team, and so I'm not writing off this season, but anything that happens this year is a bonus, and we're looking 18 months, 2 years down the line to give yourself a bit of breathing space, because otherwise every result becomes, are they going to sack him this week? Are they going to sack him this week? Are they going to sack him this week?
Yeah, and
you need to change the narrative if you're Ole Gunnar Solskjaer.
Absolutely, and you need to. I think as a coach, you need to bring in young, hungry players who can improve under you, not players that are completely proven like Mourinho brought in, which really didn't work. Declan Rice would be one of them. Whatever Solskjaer's scouting network is, to Manchester United is still a huge name, and an awful lot of people will want to play there. There's Rice wearing his beloved England jersey, but I think, you know, Rice is a young player who would energise the dressing room. I think bring in young players who have a point to prove. And bear in mind, this is a dressing room that seems to have completely down tools twice this season.
Yeah,
once for Mourinho, and then like after that the second leg against PSG, the downfall since then has been truly astonishing. And the character of that dressing room, I think it needs a bit of a purge. I'd personally get rid of Pogba in a heartbeat, and I'd bring in good characters into it. But I think Rice, like I think Matic the game has passed him by a bit. I think he's just too slow.
Yeah.
And I think Rice, despite
cash in on all those players, there's still a market for most of those players. You'll get some value on some of them. You get great value on Pogba.
Yeah.
Move on.
Yeah, and I tend to keep the English players as best you could anyway, to build some sort of a dressing room there, which is gone. But the likes of Pogba, I'd be straight away getting rid of him. Obviously Sanchez will be gone. I'd purge a load of that dressing room if Solskjaer has the actual authority to do that, which is another matter.
If he doesn't, then
he shouldn't be in the job.
Well, you at that point you're just.
But did Mourinho have the authority to do it? He probably didn't either.
There was definitely he didn't have the authority to buy who he wanted, and they would buy players, and he'd be like, "That's not what I wanted."
Did he want Pogba? Did he? If he wanted rid of Pogba, but it meant he had to go. Otherwise, I think they would have said, "Well, you can go," because Pogba's a bigger asset to us in terms of, you know, our share price.
Media.
I think it'll be fascinating. Like I don't think Solskjaer is necessarily going to do a terrible job at Manchester United, but I think this is the summer where he has to say, I'm in charge here, and just get rid of the bad influences and just and get money in as well.
Yeah, it's been interesting when the Americans have taken over that they haven't been as trophy hungry as some of the other billionaires or countries who've taken over, because in American sports you don't win that often.
Yeah,
like you don't actually.
Yeah, there's one winner.
Exactly, and so and it's very. It's a bit of a lottery generally in most of the American sports. You do then have dynasties like the Golden State Warriors and the Patriots, but they're very unusual. And I wonder if like they're just happy with making the money, and that's where this disconnect from the fans comes from.
Very, very possible. Maybe this is the future of the League of Ireland, where it'll be like, wow, it's grand, we're making loads of money here. But do you remember when, what was it? Was it 95, 96, where Ferguson got rid of, I think he got rid of Hughes, Kanchelskis, maybe one more as well. Was there one more player where you weren't going to win it with kids? There was a big purge that summer, and they went on and just he re-energised them. But I think that's a proper manager, where it's like, I have the authority. None of you was bigger than, even the same with Keane, where they basically had fallen out at the end.
Yeah.
It was like, that's the way it has to be. So Solskjaer clearly doesn't have that authority at the moment, because the players completely gave up at the end of the season. So I think Manchester United will be fascinating this season, and regardless of them not being in the Champions League, they're still a big draw for so many. Like, they're still, thereabouts the biggest club in the world.
Right, I want to move on here. Up next, we're going to hear from investigative reporter Irvin Muchnick, He's going to bring us the very latest on George Gibney's status in the United States and whether or not he could be extradited to Ireland. The former Irish swimming coach was accused of 27 counts of indecent assault and unlawful carnal knowledge, but he avoided conviction following a Supreme Court ruling in 1993 before relocating to the other side of the Atlantic. Here's an interview which we did with the former Olympian Gary O'Toole in January of 2018. He talks here about an uncomfortable encounter that he had with George Gibney during a trip to the United States when he was just 10 years old. At some point along the way, in retrospect, it's clear that you would have been one of the swimmers that George Gibney was grooming.
Yeah, and that happened on that trip. On that trip, I got terribly homesick, as one would when you're out there for 5 weeks. And I remember breaking down and crying and just saying, I want to go home. And he comforted me as one would expect an adult person in that kind of a situation. And then I went to bed and I felt fine. But later on that night, he snuck into my bedroom and he sat on the edge of the bed and he said, "Oh, are you feeling okay now?" And I said, "I'm feeling fine now. I brought you up this apple." And he put this apple on the sideboard. And then he said, "Do you want me to? Are you sure you're okay? Do you need any more comfort?" And I don't know what it was, but immediate alarm bells went off, and I said, "I'm fine. I think you should leave now." And he left, and that was the in for him. That was the opportunity. The vulnerability was there. He knew that I liked him praising me, and he went his way. And the next day I was fine. He started counting down to coming home, and I didn't think it was in any way odd that had gone on. And I didn't put two and two together until a long, long time later. I didn't realize that that's what was potentially that it could have resulted in a catastrophic personal outcome for me from that.
Maybe we'll spool forward to the bit where the penny does begin to drop, I guess, when you're actually told by a teammate that George Gibney had been abusing him. Obviously, he picks you because he thinks he's going to find someone who he trusts and who will give him a sympathetic ear. How quickly do you go, okay, yeah, like I fully understand exactly, I can see that?
When he sat down and he spoke to me, it was on a long haul flight, and he asked me whether I had ever, whether anything inappropriate had, this whole terminology that people use, anything inappropriate, whether I had, whether George Gibney had ever done anything to me that I felt uncomfortable with. And I just said, no, not at all. And then I said, "Why are you asking me these questions? Why did something happen to you?" And then it just came out. It was like turning on a tap at full pace. And he spoke for about 2 hours about what had gone on. And then he said to me, "Now, you got to keep that to yourself. I just wanted to tell you that." And I said, "I can't."
Yeah, we'll put the full link up to that interview if you want to do it if you want to watch it as a refresher, and the role that Gary O'Toole played in just making the George Gibney story public. Here's part one of our interview, though, that we're going to bring you right up to date on what the story is with Gibney now. The investigative reporter Irvin Muchnick has been covering this case for a long time and has really been one of the few people in the world who has kept the pressure up to see if there's a possibility that maybe at some point in the future George Gibney might be brought back to Ireland to face some justice. Here he is, and why there could be some significant developments in the story in the coming months.
Okay, so we're revisiting the story of George Gibney, the former Irish swimming coach, the Olympic swimming coach, who was accused of 27 counts of indecent assault and unlawful carnal knowledge before he escaped conviction following a Supreme Court ruling in 1993. I'm delighted to say we've got Irvin Muchnick, American journalist, back with us on the show, and he's been following the Gibney case closely over the past few years, and he has got a new ebook out right now, and you can get it on Amazon. It's called The George Gibney Chronicles: What the Hunt for the Most Notorious At-Large Sex Criminal in the History of Global Sports has told us about the sports establishments and governments on 2 continents. Irvin, you're very welcome to the show. How are you?
Very good, Owen. Good to be here.
So let's start at the top here, the movements to extradite George Gibney. It's a constant one. It's one we've spoken to you about on the show before. And one of the lines that really sticks out to me from the book in the opening couple of pages is that 2019 will be the year of reckoning on this. What gives you that sense?
Well, a few things have come together. There's been no shortage of institutional memory and public knowledge of the Gibney case in Ireland. but not so in the United States, where Gibney has been hiding in plain sight for now going on a quarter of a century. The three things that have happened that I believe have made 2019 the key year in the hunt for Gibney. First of all, in 2010, Irish-American activist Evan Daly, who founded the group One Child International in Florida, pressured Gibney in a way that seemed to force his hand, made him panic and apply for American citizenship. The second thing that happened was my Freedom of Information Act case against the Department of Homeland Security and the American government, which, while it didn't bring us all the smoking guns that many of us would like in the Gibney story, did smoke out the American government to reveal what happened in 2010 when Gibney applied for citizenship. And what happened was that he was denied citizenship on the grounds that he lied on his application about his criminal indictment in Ireland. He concealed it. But on the other hand, the American government decided that he was not a candidate for removal from the country because he had never been convicted of a crime. So this is a kind of catch-22. What's happening in 2019 is that all of this is playing out in the backdrop of widespread sexual abuse scandals in America, most notably in USA Gymnastics, but also other Olympic swimming groups, USA Swimming, USA Taekwondo, and others. And so there is a general new awareness as a result of that, as a result of the Me Too movement and other factors. And then finally, you have Donald J. Trump in the White House, who is not popular in certain circles, but he does have a Jones about getting rid of undesirables from the United States. Now, often that plays out to the detriment of Muslims and Central Americans, not so much with respect to white Europeans. But the confluence of circumstances seem to be ripe to make the American government mobilize to get rid of some bad actors, and Gibney seems to be in the crosshairs. My sources say this will play out in a matter of months. It's a predictive statement by me. It's not a slam dunk. I think it's going to happen in 2019. We all shall see.
Reading the book, you make the point that this case has barely made ripples over in the United States. But, as you mentioned there, a couple of the things, the Me Too movement, the Larry Nassar case, has basically created the opposite ripple movement, where I presume there's more journalists, more political figures looking into other cases like this and looking into people who really should not be safe in that country or should not have a safe haven in areas around the United States. How is this going to play out? Is there going to be political figures like Jackie Spire, who Maureen O'Sullivan was over meeting last year, or will there be new figures in the mix? What's your read in the situation?
Well, my read is that I don't believe that the dynamics that will lead to George Gibney's extradition for trial in Ireland directly relate to the efforts of TD Maureen O'Sullivan, who has reached out to Congresswoman Jackie Speier and others. Now, those efforts can't hurt, but I actually think that it's an independent set of circumstances that involve scandals in USA Swimming that a task force of federal agents are investigating, and that George Gibney is an offshoot of those investigations and is a fairly easy, low cost, high yield target for them. Essentially, after decades and decades of escaping accountability in the small country of Ireland and in the large country of the United States, things have finally lined up to where Gibney could be chum in the water. That's the hope, and that's my expectation based on the information that I have from American government sources.
The information that you have is very interesting as well, that you actually have printed in the book. And I guess it's no harm to actually chart the story of George Gibney in the United States. And one of the things is the golden ticket he got, for lack of a better term, from the diversity lottery visa. And there seems to be a discrepancy around the timing around this, Irvin. This isn't something that I was too aware of. We're not quite sure when he actually got his golden ticket.
Right. There's about a 6 or 7 year window when a lot of things happened, and we know the order in which the things happened, but we don't know exactly how they interplayed. He may have gotten a Donnelly Diversity Lottery visa as early as the late 1980s. Now, around December of 1990 is when Gibney's Irish swimming empire began to crumble, when Chalky White confided in Gary O'Toole on a plane trip to Sydney, Australia for a world swimming meet. And then early the next year, Gibney starts losing various titles and positions in Irish swimming. And in June of 1991, on a training trip with the Trojans team out of the New Park Comprehensive School in County Dublin, Blackrock, he has the incident that I call his one known sex crime on American soil, where he rapes and impregnates a teen swimmer whom he had previously assaulted, evidently in Holland. And so at that point, Gibney is no longer the Irish Olympic head swimming coach, evidently, although the timeline of that is also murky. And in 1992, he, if I have this timeline exactly right, he gets a letter or a certificate of character from an Irish Garda precinct that says he's clean, he has no criminal record. But it's at the moment when allegations are surfacing and his indictment is imminent. In 1993, Gibney is indicted on these 27 counts that you mentioned, and his barrister challenges the indictment on grounds that the allegations go so far back in time that they compromise his right to a fair trial. And in 1994, the Irish Supreme Court agrees with this position and invalidates the prosecution of Gibney. Shortly after that, he goes to a coaching position in Scotland, and from there to the United States to just outside Denver, Colorado in 1994. And somewhere in there, there's a recommendation letter or a job offer letter, I should say, from an unknown a swimming organization or swimming club in America that says we would like to have you as the coach. We don't know if that's the same team that actually hired him, the North Jeffco Hurricanes in Arvada, Colorado. But that's the known timeline at this point.
Yeah, it's interesting. I bring it up because I do wonder if this is going to be part of any investigations that may be coming down the line this year. And the North Jeffco swim team is interesting. I'm sure you've been in touch with them yourself, and I've been in touch with them, and they said that the current team administration and coaching staff were hired after George Gibney's release from the team. They never met Gibney or had any contact with him, and therefore no information even on a tertiary level. At the time, the team was operated through the North Jeffco Parks and Rec department, but since then we have separated and evolved into an individual not-for-profit 501c3 entity. You may have more success obtaining information by contacting the Parks and Rec organisation, or department, I should say. Like, is this the sort of tone you tend to get when you're contacting all these different areas of the United States, when they may or may not be linked to George Gibney, or may or may not be offering jobs to somebody who they may believe to be innocent?
Well, I don't know about the believe he's innocent part, although who can know the hearts and minds of people you ask about these things. There's the legal side of the George Gibney story, and there's like the more challenging moral or, public citizen side of the George Gibney story. And the way I describe it is, it takes a village. It takes a village to allow a George Gibney to hide in plain sight across numerous states in America, ultimately, and I believe to this moment in the state of Florida, with people denying, knowing only what they directly know, having no curiosity about somebody who is plainly a bad guy and should not be exposed to children and should almost certainly be in prison. And so that's part of the frustration of everybody who investigates this kind of story, and it's been the frustration of numerous Irish journalists across decades, and it's been mine since I took up the cause in 2015. With respect to North Jeffco, yes, these are coaches who weren't there at the time, but they told me to go to the recreation district, which I did, and got a lot of double talk from them. Their search, their diligent search through their own archives to give us any formal or informal information that might help us patch together this narrative has left something to be desired, in my humble opinion.
Right. Like, do you think there will be an appetite to try and find out how somebody like George Gibney gets a job in a place like North Jeffco, or potentially jobs elsewhere as well in the United States? Because we've spoken at the top here about the fight for extradition and the fight for deportation in terms of George Gibney, but after that you've got everything that's left behind. How did a society allow someone like George Gibney to thrive in a foreign country?
Right, and Owen, what you've just encapsulated is the reason that I've been doing what I do. Now, obviously, there are many Gibney victims, and they deserve justice, and we all want to see that play out. But I talk about Irish Gibney world and American Gibney world, and it's really swim world and sports world where we deny, deflect, don't want to know the unpleasant things behind giving us 2 or 3 weeks of feel-good entertainment on national television with a patriotic bent every 4 years, every leap year summer. So that's really what I'm after, and to me, the ultimate outrageousness of Gibney is not just Gibney himself, and not just the Irish swimming establishment in enabling Gibney, but this second stage American enabling of Gibney, first giving him a coaching position in the United States, and then after he was outed finally here and went underground to a life of great lack of settlement and movement and different jobs that were outside the swimming industry. No interest in piecing together the story and bring to account the people who enabled his odyssey and making sure that it never happens again. And the number one suspect in all this is the American Swimming Coaches Association, which post-Gibney has had an increased presence in Ireland through coaching clinics and other programs. But Judge Charles R. Breyer, in my Freedom of Information Act case, did go out of his way to say that Muchnick suspects that the American Swimming Coaches Association greased the wheels for Gibney's relocation. And that's the story that I want to impress upon my fellow Americans as we try to close the loop on the legal story of Gibney's prosecution.
That's a rather grim prospect indeed if that was the case.
Yeah, we're getting an update here on the latest developments in the George Gibney case from the investigative reporter Irvin Muchnick, who's obviously done great work on this story over the last number of years, as you can tell from this piece. During the next passage, Irvin discusses his dealings with ASCA. We've removed the name of the individual from the organisation who he corresponded with, but otherwise this piece remains intact. Have a look.
I presume you've been in touch with ASCA many, many times. Has there ever been any response from them that may shed some further light on whether or not they did grease those wheels?
Well, I corresponded with in 2012, and then he cut me off when I had the indelicacy to actually publish what he said to me, which is that the ASCA is not an organization that deals directly with children in any way, shape, or form. And think of the how ludicrous that statement is. If you had a complaint against a pediatrician who had treated your child and went to the American Academy of Pediatrics and heard back that we're just a doctor's professional association and we have nothing to do with children in any way, shape, or form. Obviously, the aquatics industry, a supermajority of its activities and its commerce involve non-adults in teaching how to swim and in coaching them. And this position by is not tenable in my view. That's sort of where things stood until last year.
Yeah, so Irvin continued to tell Owen that last year a British journalist claimed to have documents exonerating the ASCA official in question. When asked by Irvin, he didn't produce these documents and deleted the website where they had been discussed. Here's the final part of our chat with the investigative reporter Irvin Muchnick.
To say that I am very skeptical of any defense of ASCA in this matter is a great understatement. And then, of course, there's USA Swimming itself. That is the national sport governing body under the Amateur Sports Act here. It's an affiliate of USA Swimming out of Colorado Springs. Gibney must have been a member of USA Swimming during his brief tenure as a coach in Colorado. So how did that happen? The late Chuck Wilgus, who was the longtime CEO of USA Swimming, made what I think is the typical deflection response when asked about Gibney in a deposition in one of the many lawsuits by coach abuse victims in USA Swimming. And he said something along the lines of, Gibney, I think I've heard the name. What, is that Irish or something? I mean, just complete insults to our intelligence. George Gibney was a two-time national swim team head coach. He is well known in the swimming community. He's one of many international bad actors who've gone not just program to program, not just state to state or province to province, but country to country. And he is emblematic of a much larger issue in how USA Swimming treats or fails to treat the safety of the youth athletes under their charge.
What is the motivation for looking after George Gibney or helping him out in the United States?
I think it's just minimizing embarrassment and reputational damage.
But in the first place,
I'm not sure that George Gibney has anything on the leadership of USA Swimming or ASCA, but this is just what they do. This is cultural. It's ingrained. I have to add that it's not just the leadership of swimming. It's not just the swimming coaches. It's the parents. It's the athletes. It's the expectations. It's the money. It's the chase of glory and celebrity. It's all of these things that make us, that should give us pause, make us think a little bit more about how we manage and run and execute what are really extracurricular programs that involve hundreds of thousands of young athletes in the United States, only a very few of whom even have direct aspirations for college scholarships or Olympic gold medals or anything of the sort. And yet the way our youth sports system is set up with its economies of scale, the families of ordinary swimmers or people who are trying to learn life skills subsidize these high-powered, win-at-all-costs, money-hungry aspirations that help create the climate for sexual abuse and sexual abuse cover-up.
And when it comes to the cover-up and to handling this abuse and moving on beyond it, we've seen, I guess, a name change and things like that when it comes to the IASA becoming Swim Ireland over here. But I guess my point is in the initial case, why is George Gibney being looked after in the United States? I can see why, I guess, there may be a rush to try and brush up their act because they've realised they've made a mistake, perhaps, bringing him into the country. But in the first place, that's what I'm really curious about here, Irvin. There's clearly something at play here, the real motivation for allowing George Gibney to become a safe operator in the United States of America, which is very, very curious.
I agree that it's very, very curious. I think we don't have the evidence to answer that question yet, which is why I speculate on very broad-based cultural, institutional protection grounds. There could be a specific circumstance or piece of knowledge of the connection of Gibney to certain American players that constitutes leverage, but I don't know of that, and until such point as we actually get the job offer letter, which I wasn't able to get in unredacted form through my court action, but hopefully at some point in the future, whether by a person of conscience within the American Swimming Coaches Association or somewhere else through the court processes, we will get more evidence than we have right now to answer that question.
Is there a safe sport investigation currently underway?
There is a safe sport investigation, checking all the boxes. I advised T.D. O'Sullivan to put through a formal request for a safe sport investigation in the United States on two grounds. One, that Gibney was evidently a sanctioned coach here for a brief period in 1995. And number two, because one of his acts, whether it was at the point when he was an American coach or not, and he was not an American coach, he was an Irish coach, there was an incident, an allegation, which I think is more than an allegation if you read the Murphy report in 1998 in Ireland. So U.S. Center for Safe Sport did take up that case. It is in their system. I don't know what the status of it is. The U.S. Center for Safe Sport is a new agency that came out of the scandals in recent years, and it's understaffed, it's overwhelmed, its independence is questionable because all of its funding comes from the national sport governing bodies and their sponsors. I see it as the same old group of bureaucrats who've been moved around into different positions, and I don't have a high level of confidence that they're going to do anything of substance or great moment on Gibney. But to answer your question succinctly, yes, at T.D. O'Sullivan's request in 2018, there is a current active investigation by the U.S. Center for Safe Sport.
Just kind of on a final point then, just you mentioned Maureen O'Sullivan there. Is she still active in this in terms of trying to move the case further month after month after month? Because it seemed like we had a few developments last year, a few developments in 2017, but over the last maybe, 6 to 12 months, really things have gone a little bit quiet on this. Is this as a result of your information that things are set to move forward in 2019, or have we kind of reached the end of our tether to a certain extent in what we can do here in Ireland?
Well, Maureen O'Sullivan has been fantastic. I mean, she's a grand lady. She's kept the flame alive on this starting in 2015. As you know, there have been several iterations of Irish campaigns to get Gibney, and she deserves all the credit for supporting the most recent one. We're at the point in this story, Owen, where the Irish have done what they can do. It's the ball is in the court of the Americans to get rid of this guy who's had a safe haven. As Judge Breyer said in my case, we are not a haven for pedophiles. And what we need to find out now is whether that's a principle that obtains in the breach or in the observance. And it's time to observe that and look at Gibney. There's a bit of an Alphonse and Gaston act by the Irish and American governments where the Irish don't want to ask for extradition until they know he's going to be deported. And the Americans don't want to deport him unless they know that something is going to happen at the other end. But I think that, as I said, I believe, I hope, and I expect that in the year 2019, the Americans are going to take the steps to get Gibney sent back to Ireland and tried for his many crimes against young people. And that's where we stand right now. And we owe our thanks to a long line of Irish journalists like Justine McCarthy and Johnny Watterson. We owe it to whistleblowers like Chalky White, who was a victim, and Gary O'Toole, who is not a victim, but who mobilized the community of victims in a very effective way. We owe it to Evan Daly in Florida, and we owe it to the judge who did some of the right things in my Freedom of Information Act case to bring this scenario to light in the broad and in the round so that we can take action that's effective moving forward.
And of course, that judge would not have been in the position to bring those things to light unless you made that request yourself. So well done on your work, Irvin. And the new book is called The George Gibney Chronicles. It's available on ebook, as I said at the top. Amazon, is it available on your website as well?
It is. Well, if people don't have a Kindle-friendly device and want just to get a PDF copy of it, they can send the PayPal funds to me, and I'll send it out to them by email in PDF form.
Good stuff. And you can check out the rest of Irvin's work on Concussion Inc. That's concussioninc.net if you want any more. And I'm sure there'll be more on the George Gibney case over the coming months and years. Irvin Muchnick, thank you so much for taking the call.
Thank you, Owen. My pleasure.